if the other person chose to attack now. The woman chuckled and said, "Can't you tell?" As she laughed, she appeared before Samuel Cross, plain-looking, with no makeup. It was Emma Stoner. Samuel Cross said, "Oh, so it's Miss Stoner. May I ask why you've returned?" As he spoke, his eyes scanned the surroundings. Emma Stoner replied, "I was just here to deal with that demon. To prevent it from causing trouble. I didn't expect you, Sir Samuel, to act first." Samuel Cross nodded. "I see." Emma Stoner looked at Samuel Cross with a faint smile and said, "Let's not beat around the bush. There's something we need to discuss privately." With that, she turned and called out, "Come out." Following Emma Stoner's call, another figure stepped out of the shadows. It was Daniel Brooks. Daniel Brooks emerged with a laugh and said, "Ha ha, Brother Samuel, you don't seem surprised to see me. It seems you already guessed we'd come looking for you." Actually, this time all three of us were invited. They have 5 people on their side. I feel this matter won't be as simple as Andrew Turner claims. That's why the 3 of us must stick together and face it as one. #### Chapter 26, Episode 26, Extreme Poison. Samuel Cross nodded without expressing any opinion. Daniel Brooks then said, "Andrew Turner from Wind Origin City has some reputation. If he wanted to find help, he could easily seek out people he knows. Honestly, my relationship with him is merely an acquaintance, and according to what he said, Brother Samuel, you've only recently met him. A good opportunity like hunting the 5-elemental beast, there's no reason he'd let us benefit from it." Emma Stoner chimed in, "My relationship with him is also just social. However, I did collaborate with him once before. That's why I came this time." Samuel Cross asked, "What do the 2 of you mean?" Daniel Brooks responded, "It's simple. When we arrive, if it's truly about hunting the 5-elemental beast, we'll take action. Let this meeting serve as a test of intentions. If he tries to split us up for no reason, we must object, to prevent him from defeating us one by one." Samuel Cross nodded, saying, "Makes sense." Emma Stoner added, "The demon we encountered this time, while not fully developed, is certainly not newly born. But their panicked behavior suggests they might be probing us." Samuel Cross was startled. "Probing? 2 people have already died." Daniel Brooks sighed, "Brother Samuel, you're still young. 2 deaths are nothing." Samuel Cross could only remain silent. Daniel Brooks indeed had the authority to speak this way. Emma Stoner continued, "It's very likely they want to assess our true strength, or need our abilities for something. So far, I've considered 3 points. First, the ability to counter demons. Both I and the Cross brothers possess this. Second, proficiency in fire element magic. Both I and the Brooks brothers have this. Third, we are all individuals who typically act alone. Therefore, after being exploited, we must remain vigilant until we return to a safe place." Samuel Cross could only nod. What they said was something he had never considered before. Daniel Brooks glanced at the sky and said, "All right, let's go. We'll scatter and return separately." With that, he activated his light technique and soared into the sky. Emma Stoner nodded at Samuel Cross before transforming into a rainbow and flying upwards. Their speed was much faster than before, making it impossible for the swarm of locusts to keep up. Samuel Cross rode his flying sword to the edge of the desert. Behind him, a large swarm of locusts still followed, though their numbers had clearly dwindled. It seemed the swarm would not fly beyond the desert. In the distance, a few people were scattered on the ground, sitting idly. Among them, one person noticed the glimmer of Samuel Cross's flight and immediately stood up. As Samuel Cross landed, Andrew Turner stepped forward with a smile and said, "It's been a quiet journey for us. Could it be that Brother Cross has already taken care of that demon?" Samuel Cross nodded and replied, "Yes. Last night, she foolishly came looking for me again. I seized the opportunity while she let her guard down and delivered a fatal blow." Andrew Turner beamed with joy. "Excellent. Let's rest here for a while first. Soon, we'll begin crossing the swamp. This swamp is called Green Mist Swamp. Spring is its misty season, so everyone should be extra cautious. The mist of Green Mist Swamp was indeed green in color. Everyone had no choice but to activate defensive barriers, as the mist did not appear harmless. Samuel Cross surveyed the muddy swamp and the dense fog, so thick that visibility was limited to just a few meters. He remarked, "Why don't we fly over it? Are there flying insects here as well?" Andrew Turner nodded. In a place like this, there are, of course, flying insects. But the most dangerous is the venomous spotted vulture. The flying insects here are poisonous, and since the vulture preys on them, its venom is even stronger, capable of harming cultivators. Samuel Cross sighed. "You've really gone through a lot of trouble to find a place like this, Brother Andrew." "Andrew," Turner responded, "I didn't find it on purpose at first. I needed the feathers of the venomous spotted vulture, so I asked around and learned that this swamp was home to such a creature. Later, I even discovered that the 5-elemental beast is hidden at the center of this place." As the two conversed, a sudden bubbling sound echoed nearby. Not far from the group, a large swamp began to churn, with bubbles rising as if the mud were boiling. The group exchanged glances, and immediately spread out in all directions. They could sense the fluctuations of magical energy and demonic aura. There was a beast beneath the swamp. Everyone focused on the swamp as an oval-shaped object, roughly the size of a millstone, emerged from the murky water. Before it could fully surface, a barrage of spells was unleashed: fireballs, ice spears, and earthen spikes. Roar! A furious roar erupted. A bedraggled demonic beast burst out of the swamp, lunging toward one of the group. Having just awakened, the sudden attack had enraged it. Only seeing this demonic beast with a bald head, resembling a rhinoceros but without a horn, its body as large as its head. It looked like a grotesque and comical gourd. This was the demonic beast, Mud Ox. Samuel Cross immediately recognized it at a glance. This type of beast was naturally inclined to soak in muddy waters, so its emergence from the swamp was no surprise. However, its level had reached the 5th rank, which made Samuel Cross hesitant to confront it directly. A 5th-rank demonic beast possessed power between the late Foundation establishment stage and the core formation stage. This mud ox was infamous for its strength and thick skin, and being rammed or trampled by it would undoubtedly turn one into pulp. Andrew Turner shouted loudly, "Everyone, keep your distance. Use spells and magical weapons to attack and deplete its energy." As soon as he finished speaking, the group dispersed into a large circle spanning dozens of meters, surrounding the mud ox in the center. Samuel Cross, being a close combat body cultivator, naturally stayed within this circle. However, with spells and magical weapons flying chaotically through the air, he dared not approach the mud ox directly. Instead, he followed closely behind it, waiting for the right moment to act. The mud ox wailed in agony under the group's attacks but was unable to hit any target, growing so enraged that it stomped its 4 legs on the ground. Suddenly, it opened its massive mouth and spewed a stream of muddy water as large as a washbasin. Then, it spun around, spraying the muddy water in all directions. Samuel Cross, being the closest, had no time to dodge and could only dive forward, falling face-first to the ground. However, he still got splashed with some of the mud. The mud dried instantly upon contact with air, pinning him firmly to the ground, unable to move. The others were shocked by this unforeseen attack and hurriedly dodged in fear. Trick Hui, however, was not so fortunate. Targeted by the mud ox's open mouth, he was hit directly. As the most advanced cultivator in Andrew Turner's team, nearing the late Foundation establishment stage, Trick Huey's protective aura dimmed the moment the mud touched him, and his shield dissipated on its own. His magical weapon also fell to the ground. The mud ox's eyes glinted with green light as its 4 pillar-like legs bent, and it suddenly leaped into the air. Trick Hui realized the danger, but, with the mud on him dried and hardened, he struggled desperately to break free. Amid the gasps of the onlookers, the mud ox descended from the sky, its 2 front legs stomping down on Trick Hui, crushing him several meters into the ground, leaving him as nothing more than a mangled mess. Others who were hit by the mud included Sophia White, Daniel Brooks, and Samuel Cross. Sophia White and Daniel Brooks, being on the outer perimeter, were quickly assisted by nearby teammates. However, Samuel Cross, much closer to the mud ox, was left unattended as no one dared to approach. The mud ox shook its massive head and slowly turned to gaze at Samuel Cross, who was still struggling on the ground. Its green eyes grew even darker. Suddenly, its four legs bent again, preparing to leap. Everyone knew what this meant. Samuel Cross was doomed. In the next instant, with a thunderous boom, the mud ox landed on all fours. Samuel Cross was not crushed to death. At this moment, he was half kneeling on the ground, panting heavily as he stared at the mud ox, not far away. In that critical moment, Samuel Cross had desperately struggled, even peeling off a layer of his own skin, to finally break free from the cursed mud. Now, half of his body was covered in blood, and he was grimacing in pain. Seeing Samuel Cross in this state, everyone felt a mix of admiration and discomfort, silently applauding his courage while wincing at the thought of his internal organs almost spilling out. The mud bull demon glared at Samuel Cross, suddenly charging towards him with ferocity. At this moment, one of Samuel Cross's legs had a large chunk of flesh stripped away, leaving only tendons and exposed white bone, rendering him incapable of moving. Although everyone wanted to intervene, the mud bull demon was too close to Samuel Cross, and they feared their attacks might harm him. They could only stand by helplessly and watch. Samuel Cross, however, remained calm and composed. A cold glint flashed in his eyes as he pressed his hands to the ground and propelled himself upward, landing squarely on the back of the charging mud bull demon. Bang! 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 The sound reverberated like a drumbeat as Samuel Cross unleashed punch after punch onto the demon's back. Though the mud bull demon's back was slick and slippery, Samuel Cross gripped tightly with his legs, knowing full well that falling off would mean certain death. Meanwhile, Sophia White and Daniel Brooks were finally rescued. The group watched the mud bull demon rampage uncontrollably, unsure of how to act. Emma Stoner glanced at the muddy ground and said, "Freeze it, turn this swampy ground into ice." With that, she raised her hand and struck the ground with an ice spike. Instantly, the surrounding area within several meters froze into a smooth layer of ice. The others quickly followed her lead. In no time, the ground over a dozen meters wide was entirely frozen. Although the mud bull demon could crack the ice beneath its hooves, it struggled to maintain its balance. Emma Stoner threw out a flying sword, leaping onto it and soaring above the mud bull demon. She called out, "Samuel, jump. I'll catch you." Hearing this, Samuel Cross immediately pushed off the demon's back with his palms, launching himself upward. Emma Stoner swiftly caught him with one hand and carried him out of the icy battleground. The others, now calmer, resumed their assault on the mud bull demon. Whenever it attempted to escape to unfrozen ground, they would immediately cast more ice spikes to freeze the area ahead of it. Meanwhile, Samuel Cross sat cross-legged on the hovering flying sword, consuming a healing elixir to recover from his injuries. Daniel Brooks stood guard beside him. Soon, Samuel Cross's wounds began to heal gradually. Flesh and tissue regenerated, and within the time it takes to burn a stick of incense, the torn flesh on his leg had nearly fully regrown. The combination of the healing elixir, his magical physique, and the Vajra-subduing demon technique made his recovery astonishingly fast. Watching Samuel Cross's body mend itself, Daniel Brooks couldn't help but feel envious. As Samuel Cross opened his eyes, Daniel sighed, "Your body refinement techniques are truly extraordinary, Samuel. If it were me, it would take at least 3 to 5 days to recover." Samuel Cross gave a wry smile and said, "Extraordinary? It's just a superficial wound. I was this close to losing my life earlier." He looked toward the battlefield, observing the mud bull demon. Its body was now covered in injuries, and its magical strength seemed to be waning. Roar! A furious roar erupted as the mud bull demon raised its head toward the sky. Its massive mouth spewed a torrent of muddy water. Everyone scattered in alarm, but this time, the mud didn't spread out widely. Instead, it enveloped the demon's body within a radius of 1 meter. Wherever the mud landed, it turned into a swamp. The mud bull demon sank into the swamp and refused to come out. Everyone stood dumbfounded. The swamp couldn't be frozen with ice spikes, and they couldn't recklessly attack with magical weapons. As long as the mud bull demon remained in the swamp, they had no way to deal with it. After a long silence, Andrew Turner finally sighed and said, "Let's go. There's no point in wasting any more energy on it." The mud bull demon could slowly recover its magical strength in the swamp, and continuing to confront it would be futile. The group stood in silence for a moment before ultimately leaving the area. If dealing with a single mud bull demon was this difficult, how would they ever face the 5-elemental beast, their ultimate target? In the swamp, there were no trees. The nest of the emerald-spotted dove toxin lay on the ground. The bird was roughly the size of an ordinary wild chicken, but its feathers were slightly more vibrant. Its entire body was poisonous, and it was said that the poison, when specially refined, could even kill a core formation cultivator. At this moment, there was an emerald-spotted dove toxin standing in front of its small nest, its eyes filled with hostility as it glared at the people before it. Although it was only a second-tier beast, no one dared to breathe too loudly. They had accidentally wandered too close to its nest. By the time they sensed its demonic aura, the emerald-spotted dove toxin had already appeared before them, its feathers standing on end, ready to attack at any moment. After a long silence, Andrew Turner finally whispered, "Brother Samuel, you should retreat first." Though the words seemed ordinary, in this situation, it sounded more like, "Brother Samuel, you should die first." If anyone moved now, the emerald-spotted dove toxin would likely target that person for an attack. Samuel Cross glanced at the others. No one spoke, not even Emma Stoner or Daniel Brooks. Samuel Cross sighed. Andrew Turner's choice wasn't entirely wrong. Samuel practiced body refinement, and his defensive capabilities were indeed stronger than the others. If the emerald-spotted dove toxin attacked him, the others could seize the opportunity to counterattack. But this bird had wings and was naturally fast. If he couldn't dodge, Samuel Cross stopped thinking further. Without using any spiritual power, he relied solely on his physical strength and practiced light-footed techniques to slide back 4 or 5 meters. The emerald-spotted dove toxin didn't move. Samuel continued to retreat, repeatedly shifting until he was several meters away. The others only saw Samuel's figure flash before he disappeared from sight, while the emerald-spotted dove toxin remained motionless. They were puzzled but didn't dare turn around to look. After a while, Andrew Turner finally called out, "Brother Samuel, where are you?" Samuel Cross replied, "What are you saying? I can't hear you." His voice came from afar, like the wind blowing from distant mountains. Everyone felt a pang of bitterness. Could it be that Samuel Cross had escaped unscathed and even managed to flee so far? In truth, Samuel Cross hadn't retreated very far, only about 20 meters away. At that moment, he was contemplating whether to abandon this group and leave on his own or to wait for them to deal with the emerald-spotted dove toxin before continuing their journey together. While he was quite interested in the spirit stones, he was also wary of the group's unpredictable intentions. Thinking about how they had previously saved him, despite Andrew Turner's earlier cold words, Samuel decided to observe the situation a bit longer. Just as Samuel was lost in thought, the situation 20 to 30 meters away suddenly changed. Someone abruptly retreated at high speed, prompting the others to follow suit in a surprising display of coordination that even startled themselves. Each person feared they wouldn't retreat quickly enough, and their spiritual power surged. The emerald-spotted dove toxin, merely a second-tier creature, had never encountered such a variety of high-level spiritual powers before. Panicked, it reacted instinctively. Its feathers stood on end and shot out like arrows in all directions. As they retreated, everyone activated their defensive barriers. The emerald-spotted dove toxin's feathers, resembling arrows, struck their barriers. However, before they could feel relieved, the barriers began to darken rapidly, as if ink was spreading from the points of impact. The feathers had pierced through and struck their bodies. Sophia White, who had the weakest spiritual power, staggered and collapsed to the ground. William Stone's face turned a ghastly shade of black and blue. Though the feathers had pierced his body, the poison wasn't lethal yet. He struggled to suppress the spreading toxin, his eyes flashing coldly. Gripping the massive hammer in his hand, he hurled it toward the now featherless emerald-spotted dove toxin. Andrew Turner's face changed dramatically as he shouted, "Stop!" Unfortunately, his words came too late. The massive club, accompanied by the sound of rushing wind, smashed down, obliterating the jade-spotted dove and its nest into pieces. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Centered on the jade-spotted dove, it was as if a drop of dense ink had fallen into clear water, spreading a dark stain outward. The ground, weeds, low shrubs, and puddles, everything touched by the blackness immediately turned pitch black, even the air seemed tainted. Humans touched by the blackness instantly turned to black ash, their clothing disintegrating as well, leaving only their magical artifacts, which dimmed and became deformed. Storage pouches were corroded by the blackness, spilling their contents, which also turned to dust upon contact. Samuel Cross stood in shock, staring at the scene before him. Although the blackness was still far away, he couldn't help but retreat several dozen meters until the dark mass appeared as just a faint shadow in the distance. Only then did he stop. Was the jade-spotted dove truly this dangerous? He tried to recall the bestiary he had studied days ago, but couldn't remember anything relevant. What Samuel Cross didn't know was that this terrifying scene occurred because the jade-spotted dove's nest contained eggs. The eggs of a jade-spotted dove, before hatching, possessed venom potent enough to rival that of a fourth-level jade-spotted dove. This particular dove was especially fertile, with 7 eggs in its nest. That amount of venom was enough to kill a core formation cultivator, let alone a few foundation establishment cultivators. It seemed he no longer needed to worry about whether to continue following the group. After all, everyone was already dead. With that thought, Samuel Cross turned to leave. Suddenly, a voice called out, "Brother Samuel." The tone was calm, but it sent chills down Samuel's spine. In such a situation, no one could have survived. Could it be that someone had turned into a ghost so quickly, wanting to drag him back as company? He spun around immediately and saw a pale-faced figure standing behind him. Though she looked near death, she didn't quite resemble a ghost. Samuel Cross steadied himself and said, "Oh, Miss Stoner, are you all right?" Chapter 27, Episode 27 5 Elemental Beast / Emma Stoner gave a wry smile and said, "All right? I almost turned into a pile of ash just now. Fortunately, I had a puppet doll that saved my life." Samuel Cross exclaimed in surprise, "A puppet doll?" He knew about this item. It was a treasure that could sacrifice itself to save its owner, essentially giving them a second life. Emma Stoner forced a faint smile and said, "Brother Samuel, whatever you want to say, save it for later. Could you guard me for a moment while I heal?" Samuel Cross naturally agreed to protect her. After all, the group had saved him earlier, and it was mostly thanks to Emma Stoner. 2 hours later, Emma Stoner finally opened her eyes. Her complexion had recovered slightly. As soon as she opened them, Samuel Cross, sitting nearby, said, "Your breathing is still unsteady. You should rest a bit longer." Emma Stoner looked at him and shook her head. "I can't." Samuel Cross was stunned and asked, "Why?" Emma Stoner gazed into the misty distance and said, "Don't you know? The mist of green fog marsh becomes highly toxic starting from the spring equinox and only dissipates by the 5th day of the 5th lunar month, during the Dragon Boat Festival. We don't have much time left." Samuel Cross shook his head. "That's not true. Before leaving home, I checked the almanac. Today is indeed the 2nd day of the 2nd lunar month, the day of the dragon's head rising. We still have a few days, and can take our time leaving the swamp." Emma Stoner suddenly smiled, her face lighting up like a flower in bloom. What if we decide to hunt a 5-elemental beast in the next few days? Her appearance was rather ordinary, but that smile made Samuel Cross suddenly feel she was breathtakingly beautiful. Was it an illusion? Samuel Cross shook his head, brushing off the strange feeling that had crept up on him, and said, Andrew Turner isn't dead, is he? Otherwise, how would we know where the 5-elemental beast resides? Emma Stoner opened her palm. Her hand was fair and smooth like jade. Samuel Cross's gaze lingered briefly on her hand before settling on the object in her palm, a storage pouch. Then he heard Emma Stoner whisper beside him, "This is Andrew Turner's storage pouch. I got poisoned by the flock of white-spotted doves earlier while trying to take it. Inside, there's a map. Based on the marked route, the final destination should be the lair of the 5-elemental beast." Samuel Cross took the storage pouch. Inside was a jumble of random items. He quickly pulled out something that resembled a scroll and unrolled it slowly. Sure enough, it was a map, and the marked route corresponded to the path they had traveled over the past few days. Judging by the route, if the destination was indeed the 5-elemental beast, then the distance wasn't too far. Emma Stoner said, "Let's work together to take down the 5-elemental beast. You can have everything in this storage pouch. I only want the materials from the 5-elemental beast. Deal?" Samuel Cross nodded. Deal. His straightforward agreement left Emma Stoner momentarily stunned. The storage pouch contained items from several deceased individuals. Valuable though they were, they couldn't compare to the materials from a 5-elemental beast. Her initial offer was meant to be a highball tactic, expecting Samuel Cross to negotiate. After a brief pause, Emma Stoner finally said, "You'd better not just stand by and watch when it comes to fighting the 5-elemental beast. If you do, you're not getting anything from the storage pouch." Samuel Cross chuckled and said, "How could I? Since you're the one leading the way, it's only fair for you to ask for a bit more. The spirit stones in this pouch alone must be worth over 10,000, not to mention the other items. It's already more than I expected to gain from this trip. However, if the 5-elemental beast proves to be too formidable, I won't risk my life for it." Emma Stoner nodded. "Of course. Let's set out then. I've taken quite a few elixirs. By the time we reach the 5-elemental beast's lair, my magical powers should be about 70 to 80% restored." Following the map's directions, they arrived at the designated location. Lifting a large patch of grass revealed a massive hole in the ground. Samuel Cross and Emma Stoner crouched down and entered. Inside the tunnel, it was entirely rocky and not as damp as outside. Walking along the underground passage for about 2 to 3 miles, they came across an underground lake. The lake was vast. Unexpectedly, such a place existed in this swamp. Andrew Turner truly had remarkable skills to discover it. Above the lake wasn't a cave ceiling, but rather a skylight-like opening, revealing a square space a few yards wide. Thick vines covered the hole, allowing only specks of light to filter through. Looking at the lake, Samuel Cross remarked, "It seems the 5-elemental beast is in the lake, but with a lake this large, do we really have to dive in to find it?" Emma Stoner pondered silently. Clearly, she hadn't anticipated the lake to be so expansive. Samuel Cross approached the lake alone, drew out his flying sword, and stepped onto it, gliding closely above the water's surface. He wanted to gauge just how vast the lake truly was. After flying for about half an incense stick's time, Samuel Cross suddenly noticed a massive, dark object in the water, resembling a mountain. Startled, he quickly realized it wasn't a creature, but merely a shadow. Looking ahead, he spotted a small island in the middle of the lake. The island spanned only a few square miles, with numerous lush, thriving trees growing on it. As the small island came into view, Samuel Cross immediately noticed several medicinal plants aged over a decade. Suppressing the urge to pluck them, he began cautiously exploring the surroundings of the island. He held on to a sliver of hope, though he assumed Andrew Turner had already harvested any long-aged herbs. Near the water's edge, Samuel Cross discovered a giant mushroom. Mushrooms evoked peculiar memories for Samuel Cross, and seeing this one now, he couldn't help but recall the eccentric person who used to paint mushrooms. You recognize it too, don't you? This is indeed a heavenly grass mushroom, a voice interrupted Samuel Cross's thoughts. Startled, he replied, heavenly grass mushroom? The voice, of course, belonged to Emma Stoner. At some point, she had arrived. Nodding, she said, that's right. Heavenly grass mushroom. I've been wondering, Andrew Turner didn't have any bait in his storage bag. How could he have lured out the 5 elemental beast? It turns out there's a heavenly grass mushroom here, which turtle-type spirit beasts are very fond of. Samuel Cross immediately asked, then can we use this to lure out the 5 elemental beast? Emma Stoner nodded again and replied, I've already set up a simple enemy trapping formation by the shore. In a moment, we just need to lure the 5 elemental beast into the formation to prevent it from escaping back into the water. Then we can eliminate it. Curious, Samuel Cross asked, how do we lure it? Emma Stoner smiled and suddenly stepped forward to the heavenly grass mushroom. Pulling out the mushroom, which was over 3 feet tall and as large as an umbrella, she thrust it into Samuel Cross's hands and said, hurry up. With that, she flew off into the distance. Samuel Cross's face turned pale as he exclaimed, damn it. He immediately unleashed his full speed, flying toward the shore. Not long after Samuel Cross took off, a massive black shadow emerged from beneath the lake, resembling a small house. It was an enormous, peculiar turtle with a jagged, saw-like shell and a neck longer than its shell. As soon as it surfaced, it opened its mouth toward Samuel Cross and spewed a water column as large as a millstone. Samuel Cross dared not delay and quickly ascended higher, narrowly avoiding the attack. Fortunately, the giant turtle was not fast, and after this strike, Samuel Cross managed to fly out of its attack range. Upon reaching the lakeshore, Samuel Cross saw a half-mile-wide clearing that had already been prepared, surrounded by numerous small flags planted in the ground. Samuel Cross guessed that this must be a formation. Emma Stoner had been waiting there for quite some time. The moment she saw Samuel Cross, she asked, so, has it appeared yet? Samuel Cross irritably replied, just stay here, you'll find out soon enough. Emma Stoner chuckled and said, stop wasting time. Go into the formation and place the heavenly herb mushroom. These words were music to Samuel Cross's ears. He immediately walked through the small flags, reached the center, placed the large mushroom resembling an umbrella on the ground, and then flew out of the formation's range. Splash! Roar! A loud noise erupted as the giant turtle lunged out of the water. Once on land, its speed slowed even further, but its sharp eyesight quickly locked onto the heavenly herb mushroom lying quietly in the clearing. It began swaying as it crawled toward it. Emma Stoner, standing nearby, had been patiently waiting for the right moment. As soon as the giant turtle entered the formation's range, she shook the main formation flag in her hand. The formation lit up, enveloping the giant turtle within. Planting the main flag into the ground, Emma Stoner remarked, so it's a serpent-necked turtle. No wonder Andrew Turner gathered so many Foundation establishment cultivators. Standing beside her, Samuel Cross curiously asked, is the serpent-necked turtle really that formidable? Emma Stoner replied, it's hard to say. Its head cannot retract into its shell, but its magical attacks can be sustained for a very long time. Andrew Turner likely planned for most people to form a combined defensive front to withstand the turtle's attacks, while 2 or 3 others would seize the opportunity to circle behind and strike its neck. Samuel Cross quipped, you're not planning to have me rely on my thick skin and sturdy body to endure this turtle demon's attacks, are you? Emma Stoner sighed, initially, that was my plan. But after seeing you injured last time, I started doubting the thickness of your skin and flesh. So. Samuel Cross laughed and said, don't tell me you're going to withstand the turtle demon's magic attacks yourself? Let me warn you now, I won't dare to come save you when the time comes. Emma Stoner nodded and said, I'll endure its magical attacks, you jump onto its neck and attack. Its shell may be tough, but its neck is definitely not tougher than the bull demon. Samuel Cross doubted Emma Stoner's ability to withstand the continuous magical attacks of the turtle demon. Although the Serpent Realm turtle was only at the 5th level, it was brimming with vitality, and Emma Stoner was still recovering from previous injuries. Thinking this, Samuel Cross finally spoke, "Let me try first. If I can't hold it off, you can still save me. But if you can't hold it off, I really won't be able to save you." Emma Stoner looked at Samuel Cross and suddenly smiled, saying, "Didn't expect it, huh? You're actually a good person." Without waiting for his response, she slowly stepped into the grand formation. As she moved, a talisman drawing brush appeared in her right hand, and in the other, a thick stack of golden talisman papers. Seeing this, Samuel Cross was momentarily stunned before exclaiming in surprise, "A talisman artist?" Emma Stoner approached the back of the Serpent Realm turtle, her brush swiftly making strokes on the talisman papers in her left hand. Instantly, several layers of defensive light barriers appeared around her body, each layer a different color, indicating various elemental defenses. This multi-layered defense could only be achieved by a talisman artist, as the light barriers would quickly dissipate whether attacked or not, requiring constant replenishment. Once the light barriers formed, Emma Stoner flicked her brush over the talisman papers, sending one flying out. It transformed into a dragon fire, roaring as it charged toward the Serpent Realm turtle. The Serpent Realm turtle had already sensed the commotion behind it, but its movements were slow. By the time it turned around, the dragon fire was already upon it. Thud. The dragon fire struck directly between the turtle's eyes. Though it caused no real harm, it enraged the creature. It suddenly opened its mouth, spewing a green beam of light straight at Emma Stoner. Crack, 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 the defensive light barriers around Emma Stoner shattered one after another. Meanwhile, her brush moved swiftly, continuously drawing talismans that transformed into new layers of multicolored light barriers. By this time, Samuel Cross had snapped out of his daze. He leaped into the air, landing on the turtle's long neck, and began punching it forcefully. The Serpent Realm turtle kept spewing beams of light from its mouth. It extended a front leg, trying to grab Samuel Cross, but couldn't reach him. It extended the other front leg, still unable to reach. Frustrated, it tried retracting its neck into its shell. However, its neck was too long, leaving a small exposed section. Samuel Cross held his ground, continuing to pound on its head. Finally, the turtle twisted its head, turning it 180 degrees. Samuel Cross had no choice but to halt his attack and cling tightly to the old skin on its neck. Emma Stoner's brush moved with lightning speed, each stroke producing talismans that transformed into spells targeting the exposed part of the turtle's neck. Enraged, the turtle turned its head back, once again spewing beams of light at Emma Stoner. Samuel Cross sighed inwardly. Talisman artists were indeed the most extravagant type of cultivators. In just a short moment, Emma had already used up more than 100 talisman papers, truly a costly endeavor. The shell of the serpent turtle wasn't hard, but it was incredibly tough. Samuel Cross, despite putting all his strength into his attacks, was uncertain about their effectiveness. Half an hour passed. Emma Stoner's face turned slightly pale. Samuel Cross, of course, noticed this. Her injuries hadn't fully healed, and during this half hour, she had been continuously drawing talismans. While using talisman papers to cast spells could conserve spiritual energy, prolonged combat still took its toll. Suddenly, Emma Stoner spoke up, "Samuel Cross. Do you have any other tricks? If not, we might have to retreat." Samuel Cross gave a wry smile, "Sister, all my skills are in these fists of mine. How about I step down, and you take over?" Emma Stoner was about to reply when her face suddenly turned deathly pale, and she spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. Samuel Cross was startled and thought to himself, "Sister, if you're going to spit blood, could you pick another spot? The serpent turtle is still attacking." Naturally, he couldn't just stand by and watch Emma Stoner die like this. Immediately, golden light erupted from his body as he channeled all his strength into his fists, punching with all his might. At this critical moment, if the serpent turtle were to shake its head, he would fall. Boom! The serpent turtle's head dipped slightly. Samuel Cross lost his balance and tumbled off its head. As soon as he hit the ground, Samuel Cross sprang up as if he were a fish leaping out of water. However, the serpent turtle remained motionless. Its mouth continued to emit a beam of light, carving a massive crater into the ground. Samuel Cross froze in place. What was going on? His gaze landed on the serpent turtle's eyes. They were lifeless, its pupils dilated. It seemed the creature had been dead for some time. This serpent turtle was truly bizarre. Even in death, it could still cast spells. Half a day later, Emma Stoner slowly regained consciousness. As she opened her eyes, she saw Samuel Cross smiling at her. For some reason, her heart skipped a beat, and she quickly lowered her head. But then, as if remembering something, she abruptly looked up and asked, Did you defeat the serpent turtle? Samuel Cross smiled, That's right. Emma Stoner was skeptical, but when she turned her head, she saw the lifeless body of the serpent turtle lying in the distance. The ground nearby bore a deep, bottomless crater. Suddenly, Samuel Cross extended his hand and said, Hand it over. Emma Stoner was taken aback and asked, Hand over what? Samuel Cross replied, I told you before. The items in that storage pouch belong to me. Emma Stoner glanced at Samuel Cross, took out a storage pouch, and said, Here, for you. Samuel Cross accepted the storage pouch. He had already examined its contents earlier. Turning his own pouch upside down, he dumped everything out before tossing the empty pouch into a bottomless black hole. Emma Stoner began processing the beast's corpse. She retrieved a large jade bottle and placed it under the neck of the serpent turtle to collect its blood. Once the blood was fully drained, she pulled out a thin, cicada wing-like blade and started skinning the beast. After finishing the skinning, she brought out another jade box to cut the meat. Watching her skilled movements, Samuel Cross couldn't help but feel amazed. He realized he still had much to learn. Suddenly, a round object was tossed toward him by Emma Stoner. Instinctively, Samuel Cross reached out and caught it. Holding it in his hand, he quickly deduced that it was the demon core of the serpent turtle, also known as the five-elemental beast. The core was slightly smaller than a fist, with an intermingling of blue and yellow hues that lacked a clear boundary between the two colors. Could something like this really be worth 50,000 spirit stones? Samuel Cross was skeptical. Emma Stoner said, I originally intended to trade this demon core for a few stacks of talisman paper, but since you contributed quite a bit this time, I'll give it to you. Samuel Cross put the demon core away and remarked, A few stacks? This thing is worth 50,000 spirit stones. Emma Stoner replied, Nonsense, of course, I know that. Samuel Cross stood stunned and asked, How many spirit stones worth of talisman paper did you use earlier? Emma Stoner pondered for a moment before replying, Probably around 10,000 spirit stones. Samuel Cross fell silent. Spending 10,000 spirit stones in just half an hour, was this even considered a fight? With the ability to burn through spirit stones like this, the Stoner family must have an incredibly deep background. But with such a status, why would she risk coming here to hunt beasts? As if sensing Samuel Cross's thoughts, Emma Stoner sighed and said, Samuel Cross, not many people know that I'm a talisman master. Now that you do, you must keep it a secret for me. Samuel Cross nodded and said, All right. He had no desire to delve further. Matters unrelated to him were just a headache to know too much about. Looking at the empty road ahead, Samuel Cross asked, How are your injuries? There's still enough time, we can rest for half a day. He noticed Emma Stoner seemed eager to move on. Emma Stoner shook her head and said, We can't rest anymore. What if the toxic mist arrives a few hours earlier? We need to leave the Six Fog Marsh first. Such a jinx, Samuel Cross muttered under his breath as he carried Emma Stoner and dashed through the swamp. At this point, he could only pray not to encounter anything like a mud ox demon or a poison basin again. The toxic mist of the Six Fog Marsh did indeed arrive earlier than usual, not by a few hours, but by an entire day. Behind Samuel Cross, a dense, dark greenish-black fog was slowly creeping forward. Wherever it passed, green grass withered instantly, and puddles turned a sickly green. Chapter 28, The Pursuit. Emma Stoner had fainted not long ago. She was remarkably decisive. Upon seeing the continental mist, she immediately passed out without needing any urging. Samuel Cross had no choice but to carry her on his back and run for dear life. As he fled, he couldn't help but think, I've saved her twice now. Can I charge her a rescue fee? With her level of extravagance, her wealth must be immense. After running for an entire day and night, they finally escaped the foggy swamp. During the journey, Samuel Cross's luck was nothing short of miraculous. Not a single demonic beast crossed their path. The thick continental green mist began to thin out a few miles from the swamp's edge and completely disappeared upon reaching the desert. Samuel Cross sat cross-legged on a small mound, meditating to restore his energy. Compared to the swamp, the desert seemed like a haven of peace, with nothing but grasshoppers that could be fried into a fragrant snack. Emma Stoner opened her eyes at just the right moment. Did she have some kind of foresight, knowing the danger had passed? Samuel Cross wondered. You're awake. Rest a bit more, we've made it out of the swamp, he said nonchalantly. Emma Stoner's face flushed red as she looked at Samuel Cross with embarrassment. Thank you. You've saved me yet again. Samuel Cross thought to himself, if you really want to thank me, show some sincerity. However, he simply replied, no need to be so formal, it was nothing. You're not that heavy, after all. Hearing this, Emma Stoner's face turned even redder. It was clear that Samuel Cross had been carrying her the entire way. At this point, Samuel Cross was too exhausted to continue the conversation. After battling the serpent of the abyss and then running nonstop for a day and a night without rest, he needed to restore his energy. Otherwise, if another battle arose, he might suffer internal injuries. Seeing Samuel Cross's fatigued state, Emma Stoner said, You've trained your body. Would you like to drink some blood from the serpent of the abyss? Samuel Cross, hearing that, slightly opened his tightly shut eyes. Blood of the Gui serpent realm? Emma Stoner nodded and said, Yes. I know of a type of elixir that strengthens the body, and its main ingredient is the blood of the Gui serpent realm. This Gui serpent realm creature is a 5-elemental beast, so the effects of its blood will undoubtedly be even better. Samuel Cross didn't waste words, extending his hand. Emma Stoner smiled, taking out a jade vial containing the blood and handed it to him. Samuel Cross opened the vial stopper and took a sip. It was foul. The moment the blood entered his mouth, Samuel Cross immediately frowned. Just one sip was enough for him to lose the courage to take a second. Returning the jade vial, Samuel Cross struggled to suppress the urge to vomit. The blood of the Gui serpent realm was indeed effective. He closed his eyes, calmed his mind, and quickly entered a meditative state. Emma Stoner sat cross-legged in front of Samuel Cross, gazing at his thick eyebrows, almost reaching out to touch them. Lost in thought for a moment, she raised the jade vial containing the Gui serpent realm's blood to her lips, gently placing the rim of the vial in her mouth. This action startled even herself, and as she regained her senses, her face turned bright red. Tilting her head back, she took a sip of the blood. When Samuel Cross opened his eyes, it was already midday the next day. Warm sunlight shone upon him. Around him, a small defensive formation had been set up, with Emma Stoner also inside it, sitting not far away with her eyes closed. It seemed she was recovering from her injuries, likely setting up the formation out of concern for unforeseen dangers. Samuel Cross's magical energy had completely recovered by now. He reached into his storage pouch, pulled out a large handful of dried venison, and stuffed it into his mouth, without even looking. Then, grabbing a wine pouch, he took a big gulp. Lying on the ground and staring at the sky, Samuel Cross let out a sigh. For now, they were safe. Inside his storage pouch were over 10,000 spirit stones, along with those elixirs and the demon core of the 5-elemental beast. He wouldn't need to worry about lacking resources for cultivation for a long time. As for those who had perished, he hoped they would soon find peace in their next lives. 6 days later, Emma Stoner woke up. Samuel Cross had long wanted to leave quietly, but he was concerned that manipulating the formation might endanger Emma Stoner, so he patiently waited. Now, as she finally opened her eyes, Samuel Cross immediately said, "Ah, you're awake. Well, I'll be on my way." Emma Stoner looked at Samuel Cross and sighed, "Do you have urgent matters to attend to?" Samuel Cross shook his head, "Not exactly." Emma Stoner smiled gently. With a slight wave of her hand, the formation flags surrounding them immediately flew up and landed in her grasp. Then, Emma Stoner said, "Your flying speed is too slow. I've kept you waiting for days, so why don't I give you a lift?" After speaking, Emma Stoner took out a paintbrush and tossed it into the air. The brush caught the wind, expanding rapidly until it transformed into a massive brush, a full 10 feet long and as thick as a barrel. Samuel Cross initially intended to decline, but upon seeing the brush, he became intrigued and quickly nodded, "All right. Take me along." With that, he leaned forward and sat on the brush. Emma Stoner also leaned forward to sit on the brush. She gently tapped its body, and the brush instantly lit up, carrying the two of them into the sky at a speed twice as fast as Samuel Cross's own flight. In the air, Emma Stoner's black hair fluttered gracefully, her elegant figure captivating to behold. Samuel Cross praised, "This brush is excellent, so fast." Emma Stoner seemed to smile, "Do you want it? I'll give it to you." Samuel Cross quickly replied, "No need, no need. A paintbrush is too refined for me." Emma Stoner asked, "What do you plan to do after you return?" Samuel Cross responded, "Train." Emma Stoner inquired further, "No more hunting demonic beasts?" Samuel Cross chuckled, "I have spirit stones now, so I'm feeling lazy. I'll deal with it later." Emma Stoner said, "Then, next time, let's go hunting demonic beasts together again." Samuel Cross laughed and replied, "Sure. Next time, when there's a chance, we'll go together." Half a day later, the two landed outside Wind Origin City. Emma Stoner looked at the city gate not far ahead and suddenly asked, "Samuel Cross, would you like to see my true appearance?" Samuel Cross was taken aback. For some reason, upon hearing this, he was reminded of Selena. He chuckled self-deprecatingly and said, "Sure. Are you, by any chance, a fox spirit? Bro, what do you think?" Emma Stoner spoke softly as she gently turned around. Her ordinary face hadn't changed much, but her eyes became large and crystal clear, like stars in the night sky. These eyes instantly made her face come alive, like the finishing touch of a master painter bringing a dragon to life. Anyone who saw her now would not mistake her for the Emma of a few days ago. It was like the difference between brass and gold. Samuel Cross stared blankly for a long moment before saying, "Why make yourself look ugly for no reason?" Emma Stoner smiled but didn't answer Samuel Cross's question. Instead, she turned and walked toward the city gate. As soon as Emma Stoner entered the city, the guards at the gate immediately bowed respectfully. "Mrs. Stoner has come to Wind Origin City again." These guards, whose cultivation levels were clearly on par with Emma Stoner's, displayed expressions as if they were meeting a venerable elder. Emma Stoner, however, acted as though this was nothing out of the ordinary. She merely nodded slightly and gracefully stepped into the city. Samuel Cross did not witness this scene. Although the deaths of Andrew Turner and the others had nothing to do with him, he still felt a bit uneasy. Moreover, he had some of their magical artifacts in his storage pouch. Thus, he chose to circle around to the busiest city gate, keeping his head down as he mingled with the crowd, waiting to enter the city. Suddenly, a golden light shot toward Samuel Cross. He was only 7 or 8 meters from the city gate. Even before the golden light reached him, Samuel could sense it. It carried a familiar aura. Emma Stoner? As Samuel tilted his head, a small golden flying sword carrying a golden letter landed in front of him. A flying sword message? Samuel stepped out of the line of people waiting to enter the city, grabbed the small flying sword, removed the golden letter, and infused it with his spiritual energy. As soon as the golden letter recognized Samuel Cross's spiritual energy, two words appeared, "Leave now." Before Samuel could make sense of it, a commotion erupted at the city gate. A young man in luxurious clothing dashed out and, in an instant, stood before Samuel, sneering, "So, you've finally returned. I've been waiting for you for a long time." As he spoke, golden light flashed in his hand, and a golden circular flying blade slashed toward Samuel Cross. Startled, Samuel threw the golden letter aside. Suddenly, golden light burst forth from his body as he raised his fist to strike at the golden flying blade. The golden letter, the moment it left Samuel's hand, made a soft bang before disintegrating into ashes. Samuel Cross's fist smashed against the golden blade, producing a metallic clang. The golden blade was sent flying backward, revealing that Samuel Cross's fist was even sturdier than the weapon. Without looking back, he dashed toward the outskirts of the city. Moments earlier, he had clearly seen that the young man in luxurious attire was a mid-stage foundation establishment cultivator, bearing a 7-part resemblance to Andrew Turner. It seemed that if he wasn't Andrew's brother, he must be a close relative. Indeed, what one fears most often comes to pass. The area around the city, spanning over a dozen miles, was a no-fly zone. The young man in luxurious attire couldn't match Samuel Cross's speed and was soon left several miles behind. Samuel Cross headed toward a less populated area while rummaging through his storage pouch, searching for a flying artifact faster than his current one. Soon, his eyes landed on a flying shuttle. It appeared unused, and its owner was unknown, but it seemed slightly faster than a flying sword. Having made his choice, Samuel Cross immediately retrieved the artifact. Once he exited the no-fly zone, he infused it with spiritual energy to activate it, leaped aboard, and transformed into a streak of light, soaring through the skies. The young man in luxurious attire watched Samuel Cross vanish into the distance and coldly sneered. "Humph. Samuel. So, it really is you. Brother, rest assured, I will avenge you." With that, he also took out a similar flying shuttle, stepped onto it, and pursued Samuel Cross's trail of light. Samuel Cross struggled to maintain his balance. While the flying shuttle was indeed fast, it was difficult to control, nearly throwing him off several times. As he sped onward, a barrage of fireballs suddenly flew toward him from behind. If not for the shuttle's inherent instability, he might have been struck. Glancing back, he saw the young man in luxurious attire closing in, the fireballs clearly his doing. Noticing that his opponent was also using the same type of flying shuttle, Samuel Cross realized he had chosen the wrong artifact. Gritting his teeth, he descended rapidly, landing on the ground. Below was a riverbank. As Samuel Cross landed, he wasted no time and immediately shouted, "Wait. I didn't kill Andrew Turner. He died from poisoning." The young man coldly replied, "Humph, that's just a convenient excuse. The dead can't testify. You can say whatever you want." Samuel Cross continued, "It was the venom of the poisonous band crows. Someone disturbed their nest. I escaped, but the others didn't make it." The young man sneered, "Oh? Then why couldn't those stronger and faster than you escape? I know exactly who my brother was with. Of the group, only 3 were early-stage foundation establishment cultivators. The rest were far more powerful than you." Samuel Cross argued, "How could I possibly handle all of them on my own?" The young man's hand glowed with spiritual energy as he retorted, "Enough nonsense. Take this." Whoosh! Whoosh! 2 golden blades shot toward Samuel Cross from opposite directions. Seeing that words wouldn't sway his opponent, Samuel Cross grew furious. Did this guy really think he was afraid? Clenching his fists, he swung both arms outward. Clang! Clang! With 2 sharp sounds, he deflected the golden blades. Then, stomping hard on the ground, he launched himself toward the young man. The young man was startled. At the city gate earlier, his hurried attack and the deflection of his flying blade didn't seem unusual. However, now, despite channeling his strength, he couldn't harm the person in front of him, leaving him somewhat flustered. He knew that, Although he was Andrew Turner's younger brother, his cultivation and aptitude were a level above his elder brother's. Boom! Samuel Cross landed a punch on the young man's protective barrier, causing it to flicker and tremble incessantly. Although the young man staggered backward, he still took the hit. Seeing his opponent retreat, Samuel Cross didn't pursue him further. After all, the opponent's speed was faster than his own. The young man widened the distance and coldly said, just a little extra strength, don't get too cocky. You didn't even bother to find out who I, Nathan Turner, really am. This time, you're in trouble. As Nathan Turner spoke, a flash of light appeared in his hand, revealing a bamboo-like object. It was as thick as a child's arm, about 2 meters long, completely black, and hollow in the middle, resembling a fire-blowing tube used in kitchens. Samuel Cross said nothing, summoning a green bronze shield to block in front of him. At this moment, the young man pressed his lips to one end of the tube, puffed up his cheeks, and blew. Instantly, several fireballs shot out from the small opening at the other end, flying toward Samuel Cross. A trace of surprise flashed in Samuel Cross's eyes. So many fireballs? Who would have thought it was really a fire-blowing tube? Boom! 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 A series of explosions followed. The green bronze shield flickered with light, and dents immediately appeared on its surface. The sheer number and density of fireballs were overwhelming. This was merely a high-grade low-tier shield, unable to withstand such an onslaught. Samuel Cross kicked the shield, sending it flying toward Nathan Turner, then darted into the dense forest nearby. Nathan Turner decisively dropped his protective barrier, which consumed his spiritual energy, and focused entirely on chasing Samuel Cross while blowing fire. The agility of the figure ahead made it challenging to land a hit. Samuel Cross finally breathed a sigh of relief upon reaching the forest's center. The dense trees made running slightly cumbersome, but they also obstructed Nathan Turner's vision from above, giving Samuel Cross the upper hand. As expected, Nathan Turner's accuracy diminished significantly. Several fireballs landed in unrelated areas, and he couldn't afford to set the entire forest ablaze. Reluctantly, he had to lower his altitude, staying close to the forest canopy to track Samuel Cross's movements. However, as he descended, he suddenly heard a strange noise. Looking down, he saw Samuel Cross leaping out from a cluster of green leaves, lunging toward him. Nathan Turner hastily aimed the fire-blowing tube at Samuel Cross, intending to unleash fireballs. But Samuel Cross had already closed the distance, striking the tube with one palm and delivering a punch to Nathan Turner's abdomen. The punch was so powerful that it caused Nathan Turner to double over, even vomiting bile. Yet, he somehow managed to forcefully stabilize himself and ascend again. After landing his punch, Samuel Cross fell to the ground. He had no intention of pursuing further, knowing that his speed in midair couldn't match Nathan Turner's. Nathan Turner only managed to regain his breath after ascending several dozen meters. Straightening his body slowly, he found it surprising that Samuel Cross didn't continue attacking. Just moments ago, he had been prepared to use a move that would ensure mutual destruction. At this moment, the forest was unusually quiet. It was unclear whether Samuel Cross had taken the opportunity to escape or was hiding somewhere. Looking at the dense forest, Nathan Turner hesitated. Should he continue searching for this man's whereabouts, or simply leave? Earlier, he had taken a heavy punch from Samuel Cross, leaving him seriously injured, which was not ideal for a prolonged fight. While he was deliberating, a voice echoed through the forest, "Andrew Turner was not killed by me. He died from the toxic claws of the white-spotted crane at the green mist swamp. That's the truth. Once the poisonous mist dissipates, you can go and check. There will definitely be traces left." Nathan Turner sneered coldly. The poison mist dissipates? If I'm not mistaken, it will take 2 months for the mist in the green mist swamp to clear. Who would believe you? Unless you come back with me to the Turner family, I can guarantee your safety, and then we'll go to the swamp together in 2 months. As Nathan Turner spoke, his eyes continuously scanned the surroundings below, but Samuel Cross was cunning. His voice alternated between left and right, making it impossible for Nathan to pinpoint his location. Samuel Cross laughed loudly, haha. And what can you do if you don't believe me? Go back to the Turner family with you? Do you take me for a fool? Right now, there's nothing you can do to me. Samuel Cross wasn't idle in the forest either. He searched everywhere for something he could use, preferably finding 1 or 2 spirit beasts. If he could lure Nathan Turner into attacking them, it would give him the upper hand, whether to advance or retreat. Unfortunately, the immortal binding rope was of too low a grade. Otherwise, with just 1 rope, he wouldn't have to rack his brain like this. Nathan Turner sneered coldly, don't think hiding down there makes you safe. With that, he sat cross-legged on his flying disc, placed the fire blower horizontally in front of him, and closed his eyes, chanting an incantation. Samuel Cross, hiding in the forest below, naturally noticed Nathan Turner's actions. However, he couldn't tell whether Nathan was deliberately setting a trap or genuinely preparing to cast some powerful spell. Immediately, Samuel Cross quietly crept toward the edge of the forest. If it turned out to be a truly formidable spell, he would jump into the river to escape. At this moment, the scenery around Nathan Turner became distorted. Judging by the atmospheric changes, he was undoubtedly preparing to cast a powerful fire element spell. The distortion of the surroundings was caused by the intense heat. Samuel Cross didn't dare to act rashly. Who knew if the spell was already complete? If he revealed himself now, he would surely become an easy target. Finally, Nathan Turner slowly opened his eyes, a mocking glint flashing within them, as if he was certain of his victory. Seeing the expression in Nathan's eyes, Samuel Cross felt a sinking sensation in his heart. Could he really have a way to destroy an entire forest? Nathan Turner's actions answered Samuel's question. He slowly grasped the fire blower in front of him, and flames burst forth from it, quickly engulfed in a blazing inferno. Then, Nathan Turner coldly uttered, "Wildfire blaze." Chapter 29, Pursuit, Part 2, Whoosh. Flames from the fire blower shot out instantly, scattering in all directions toward the dense forest below. Each spark expanded rapidly as it fell, transforming into massive fireballs as large as houses, trailing long fiery tails before slamming into the ground. Witnessing this, Samuel Cross immediately recognized the danger. Without hesitation, he took a few quick steps and leaped into the river. The moment Samuel Cross's figure emerged, Nathan Turner spotted him. Ignoring the forest, now reduced to ashes, Nathan soared above the river. From his fire blower, countless fireballs erupted, shooting straight into the water. Hiss! 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 Thick white steam rose as each fireball struck the river, creating massive clouds of vapor. As the fireballs continued to rain down, the river began to evaporate, and the mist grew increasingly dense. Nathan Turner, having learned from a previous ambush, kept his distance from the thickening mist. Swish! A water arrow as thick as an arm shot out from the mist, heading straight for Nathan Turner. His eyes flashed coldly. Finally making a move, he sneered. Quickly, he adjusted the fire blower, launching a fireball directly at the incoming water arrow. Roar! A deafening roar echoed, followed by a golden figure bursting out of the mist, charging straight at Nathan Turner. The moment Nathan heard the roar, he knew something was wrong. It was not a sound a human could produce. As the golden figure emerged, Nathan Turner finally saw it clearly, a colossal golden carp, over 8 meters long, its entire body shimmering with golden light. It was a level 4 demonic fish. According to legend, carp that leap over Wind Pavilion and pass the Dragon Gate transform into dragons. Golden carps inherently possess some dragon-like traits, and now, enraged by Nathan Turner, it charged at him through the fireballs. Crash! The golden carp rammed into Nathan Turner, sending him reeling backward. As he was thrown back, the mist surged again, and another golden figure darted out. This time, it was Samuel Cross riding a flying sword. He closed in on Nathan Turner, delivering a fierce punch to his airborne form. Crack. Splurt. Nathan Turner heard the sound of his bones shattering as he spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. Samuel Cross showed no mercy. With a forceful kick, he propelled himself forward, chasing after Nathan Turner's falling body and landing another brutal punch, sending him crashing to the ground. Boom! Nathan Turner hit the ground hard. Samuel Cross landed shortly after, staring at Nathan Turner's feeble form. A cold glint flickered in his eyes as he slowly approached. He hadn't intended to kill Nathan Turner, but the latter had been relentless. At this point, there was no other choice but to end him. Humph! A cold snort suddenly reached Samuel Cross's ears, making his hair stand on end as a sense of danger overwhelmed him. Before he could retreat, Nathan Turner in front of him exploded with a deafening boom. The shockwave hurled Samuel Cross 10 meters away. Cough, cough. As the dust settled, Samuel Cross coughed violently, struggling to rise from the scorched ground. Glancing at the blood he had just coughed up, he forced himself to sit upright, trembling as he retrieved a healing potion. He poured the entire bottle into his mouth. "That brat is ruthless," he muttered bitterly. "He tried to take me down with him." If not for the magical runes holding his flesh together, Samuel Cross feared he would have been reduced to nothing but shattered bones. After swallowing the pill, Samuel Cross overturned his storage pouch, pouring out a pile of spirit stones that formed a small mound beside him. He then closed his eyes. He was aware that this place was less than 100 miles from Wind Origin City and knew the intense battle earlier might have drawn attention. However, he didn't care. If he didn't treat his injuries in time, he'd soon accompany Nathan Turner on the road to the afterlife. Samuel Cross had just entered meditation when a graceful figure landed not far from him. She wore a wide-sleeved robe in white and lavender, her hair tied up high, and her star-like eyes fixed intently on Samuel Cross. After a long moment, she sighed and said, "Samuel Cross, I thought it would be my turn to save you this time." This person was none other than Emma Stoner. While others dared to seek out Samuel Cross, no one would dare to look for her. Even if people knew Andrew Turner's team included someone named Emma Stoner, they would never suspect her true identity. Whatever she desired, she only needed to ask, and others would willingly offer it to her. Why would she need to act herself? To others, it was merely a coincidence of names. Emma Stoner quietly sat beside Samuel Cross. Nearby, there was also a large gray carp lying on its side. It had been affected by the explosion earlier, though it was some distance away. It was still heavily injured, its once golden scales now a dull gray-black. At this moment, it was absorbing the spiritual energy from the spirit stones beside Samuel Cross to heal itself. In the distant river, colorful carp of various sizes crowded along the bank, poking their heads out of the water and repeatedly spouting streams of water in this direction, drenching the large carp. The large carp rolled its eyes, warily watching Emma Stoner. Seeing its cautious gaze, Emma Stoner simply smiled. The carp seemed to sense no malice from her and gradually let down its guard, eventually resuming its absorption of the dense spiritual energy around it. Samuel Cross opened his eyes. He wasn't sure how long he had been meditating, but judging by the sky, it had been at least a day and a night. He couldn't help but feel fortunate. Meditating here for an entire day and night without anyone passing by was truly a stroke of luck. Though his internal injuries were suppressed, full recovery would require either a place with abundant spiritual energy or 3 to 5 years of meditation. As Samuel Cross pondered where to go next, he suddenly heard a strange squelching sound. Quickly turning his head, he saw the large golden carp struggling to move toward the river. Samuel Cross chuckled and said, "So, you're still here? Since we worked together to defeat the enemy, I'll give you a hand." With that, he stepped forward, picked up the large carp, and tossed it into the river. After retrieving the spirit stones from the ground, Samuel Cross glanced into the distance. About 10 meters away, there was a patch of scorched earth with a pile of debris. Among the debris, he spotted a storage pouch and a fire-blowing tube. Without hesitation, he strode over, picked up the storage pouch, and took the fire-blowing tube in his hand. Inside the storage pouch were some pills and spirit stones, though not many. This wasn't surprising, who would carry their entire fortune with them? As for the fire-blowing tube, Samuel Cross examined it carefully. It was an excellent item, especially useful for casting large-scale offensive spells like wildfire spreading across the plains. Upon closer inspection, the item bore no inscriptions or identifying marks. Without its magical aura, it could easily be mistaken for an ordinary fire-blowing tube. Unfortunately, he didn't know its name. Shaking his head, Samuel Cross stored the fire-blowing tube in his pouch. Samuel Cross was preparing to leave when, from a distance, a streak of golden light flew towards him. He paused and immediately understood, it was a flying sword messenger. It was Emma Stoner again. Attached to the flying sword were two items, a map and a golden leaf. Stashing the map away, Samuel Cross infused a spiritual power into the golden leaf to read the message. The map outlines the safest route to the next stronghold. Do not return to Wind Origin City, the Turner family might cause trouble for you. Samuel Cross smiled. She was truly considerate. However, using a flying sword messenger was incredibly costly. This woman was certainly willing to spend. Tossing the golden leaf aside, Samuel Cross examined the map. Indeed, it displayed a winding route, with detailed information about the areas it passed through, even noting potential appearances of spirit beasts. After reviewing the map, Samuel Cross prepared to set off, but noticed that the small golden sword hadn't left, nor had the golden leaf disappeared. He froze for a moment before realizing, she wanted him to reply. This type of flying sword messenger required beast blood mixed with cinnabar to write a response. Where could he possibly find beast blood? Samuel Cross sighed. Biting his fingertip, he wrote on the golden leaf, "Thank you, take care." Then, he attached the golden leaf back onto the small golden sword. The sword emitted a buzzing sound before shooting up into the sky. In a pavilion within Wind Origin City, a woman dressed in a flowing purple and white robe was staring intently at a small formation in front of her. Suddenly, the formation lit up, and a small golden sword with a golden leaf attached appeared within it. The woman's face lit up with joy as she extended her hand. The small sword immediately flew into her palm. She eagerly removed the golden leaf and infused it with her spiritual power, only to see 4 simple words, "Thank you, take care." During the day, Samuel Cross traveled. At night, he rested. He didn't move quickly, relying only on light body techniques, which were much slower than flying on a magical artifact. Fortunately, the map Emma Stoner had provided proved highly useful. Thanks to the route it outlined, he traveled for over a month without encountering any spirit beasts. One day, as he passed a large, sparsely leaved tree, a black dot appeared in the sky. Samuel Cross smiled. It was the emerald-eyed condor. After being released earlier, they had lost contact after leaving the misty marshlands. Now, they had finally reunited. The emerald-eyed condor chirped incessantly as it flew up to Samuel Cross, rubbing its small head against his face. It was clear the creature was overjoyed. Samuel Cross was equally pleased. Given his current injuries, having the emerald-eyed condor scout ahead would make his journey much safer. After sending the emerald-eyed condor ahead to scout, Samuel Cross unfolded the map. According to it, the next stronghold was only about 10 days away. The route description was brief, mentioning only low-level insect beasts. Folding the map back up, Samuel Cross murmured, "Low-level insect beasts? That's nothing to worry about. Even swarms of flying scorpions couldn't trouble me." Emma Stoner likely hadn't elaborated further because she knew these creatures posed no real threat. The emerald-eyed condor was gone for half a day. Samuel Cross began to worry it had encountered trouble and was about to search for it when a black dot appeared in the sky. He let out a sigh of relief, but before he could fully relax, a second black dot appeared, followed by a third and a fourth. Samuel Cross's heart sank. Damn it! Could this little guy have been chased down and brought a whole group of pursuers back with it? The emerald-eyed condor quickly flew up to Samuel Cross, chirping anxiously. Samuel Cross kept his gaze fixed on the sky. The 3 black dots turned out to be 2 people and another bird. The bird led the way, with the 2 people in pursuit. It was a golden-eyed condor. It had also found its way here, though it appeared worse for wear. Its spiritual energy was depleted, and it seemed injured. Chasing after it were 2 spirit refining stage cultivators at the 12th level, riding on flying artifacts. The 2 individuals appeared slightly surprised upon seeing Samuel Cross. They descended about 2 or 3 meters away from him, sizing him up from head to toe. Samuel Cross also assessed the pair. Clearly, their family background was quite affluent, otherwise, they wouldn't possess flying magical artifacts. The young man seemed around 18 or 19 years old, slightly taller than Samuel, with thick eyebrows and large eyes. The young woman appeared 1 or 2 years younger, with delicate features, not particularly stunning but not unattractive either. Samuel Cross spoke first. "Why are you chasing after my spirit beast?" As he spoke, he clenched his fist slightly. He wasn't truly afraid of the 2. Although his current magical power was only about 30% of its peak, his physical strength remained formidable. The young man immediately clasped his hands together and said, "Oh. My apologies. We didn't know it was your spirit beast because we couldn't sense any spiritual aura from it, so." The young woman snorted coldly, "Humph, brother. Why are you afraid of him? There are 2 of us, and he's alone. His magical power is so weak. We've chased after it for so long, and not holding him accountable is already a favor. Does he even dare to make a move?" Samuel Cross's gaze turned icy as he stared directly at the young woman. Her earlier arrogance and disdainful demeanor faded instantly under his piercing look. She shuddered slightly and took a step back. The young man quickly stepped in front of her, clasping his hands again and saying, "I beg your pardon, my sister is not well versed in etiquette. We are members of the Long family. My name is Adrian Long, and my sister here is Susan Long." He could sense that, despite Samuel's low magical power, there was an imposing aura about him. Hastily, he mentioned their family name. Samuel Cross, in truth, had no intention of starting a fight. He had never even heard of the Long family. Since the young man had offered a conciliatory gesture, he decided to let it go. With this in mind, Samuel clasped his hands and replied, "Oh, no problem. I am Samuel Cross." The young man smiled and said, "Brother Samuel, are you leaving the city or entering it? If you're hunting insect beasts, perhaps we could travel together." Samuel Cross smiled faintly, "Oh, I'm entering the city, so I won't be able to join you." With that, he nodded to the pair and slowly walked away. After walking a distance, Samuel Cross chuckled softly, "Great king, you've become so weak. I remember you weren't like this in the past." The golden-eyed condor perched on Samuel's shoulder replied, "And you're one to talk. If it weren't for searching for you, I wouldn't have ended up in this state, running into a cunning hawk along the way. Ugh, let's not talk about it anymore." With the golden-eyed condor and emerald-eyed condor scouting ahead, Samuel felt much more at ease and continued his journey smoothly. "Samuel Cross! Samuel Cross!" The golden-eyed condor, still in the sky, called out loudly before even landing. Its excitement was evident. Samuel Cross said, "What's going on? Did something good happen?" Golden-eyed condor replied, "Of course, something good happened. The 2 people who were chasing me that day are now being chased by a giant scorpion." "So amusing. So amusing." Samuel Cross couldn't help but laugh, saying, "A scorpion?" He quickly saw it on the path that must be taken to return to the city, or in other words, along his route. The 2 siblings from the Long family he had encountered earlier were now facing off against a blazing red scorpion as large as a millstone. Judging by their tattered clothes, their situation seemed rather dire. It was unclear how they had managed to end up ahead of Samuel Cross. As soon as the 2 saw Samuel Cross approaching from afar, they were overjoyed. Adrian Long shouted loudly, Brother Samuel. We meet again. Samuel Cross said indifferently, be careful, its big tail is about to strike. He assessed the giant scorpion. It had already reached a third-level cultivation and seemed quite formidable. The weapons in the hands of the Long siblings failed to leave even the slightest mark on the scorpion's body. Golden-eyed Condor, perched on Samuel Cross's shoulder, excitedly watched the massive scorpion and shouted, to the left. To the left. Now to the right. Hurry up. Ah. It was acting like a commander, though naturally, the giant scorpion didn't understand its words. Samuel Cross tilted his head and smiled, saying, stop watching. I want to return to the city. What's the situation around here? Golden-eyed Condor replied, return to the city? Oh. The area is full of scorpions, big and small. Don't go to the city. Head the other way. Samuel Cross sighed. He needed to return to the city to heal his wounds. Since the area was already swarming with scorpions, he might as well deal with this one and pass through here. Fiery scorpions didn't like living in groups, and the territory of a third-level crimson scorpion would undoubtedly be vast, offering a certain degree of safety. With that thought, Samuel Cross began channeling his magical energy, preparing to act. Rip. Adrian Long, distracted, was caught by the scorpion's massive tail. Although he narrowly avoided a direct hit, his enchanted robe was torn apart, completely ruined. Samuel Cross called out to him, give me your longsword. He had noticed that Adrian Long wielded a fine sword, and with his current magical state, using Adrian's weapon would be just right. Adrian Long hesitated for a moment, before finally throwing the long sword in his hand to Samuel Cross. Samuel Cross reached out to catch it, and as soon as the sword landed in his hand, it felt incredibly heavy. The sword was astonishingly heavy. Such a thin sword weighed no less than 1,000 pounds, making it extremely difficult for Adrian Long to wield. Seeing Samuel Cross hold the long sword with just one hand, Adrian Long was startled. In truth, he hadn't believed Samuel Cross could use the sword, he had thrown it over merely to gain his trust. Susan Long held a pair of pink-colored mandarin duck rings, one large and one small. When she saw Adrian Long toss the long sword, she exclaimed in surprise, brother, if you give him the long sword, what will you use? As she spoke, she raised her mandarin duck rings in front of her and moved closer to Adrian Long. The enormous fiery red scorpion, however, did not attack again. It ignored the Long siblings and turned around, its small spindle-like eyes fixed intently on Samuel Cross. As a third-level magical beast, it instinctively sensed that Samuel Cross was more dangerous than the two behind it. Above, the golden-eyed Condor and emerald-eyed Condor had already taken flight. The golden-eyed Condor said, Samuel Cross, if you die, in 180 years, my king will surely avenge you. With that, it flapped its wings and ascended higher, clearly not believing Samuel Cross would take action. The emerald-eyed Condor did not leave. It flapped its wings, soaring into the sky, before diving down and crashing into the back of the giant scorpion. The scorpion didn't even glance at it. A loud bang echoed as the emerald-eyed Condor collided with the scorpion's back, as if slamming into a steel plate. The impact left the condor dazed, and it took a long while before it managed to fly back toward Samuel Cross. By this time, Susan Long had reached Adrian Long's side. She winked at her brother, signaling that they should take this chance to escape. Adrian Long gritted his teeth and shook his head. Suddenly, he pulled out a talisman, clasping his hands together in front of his chest to channel his magical energy and activate it. The talisman contained a sealed spell far beyond his cultivation level, forcing him to expend a significant amount of energy to use it. Hashtag Chapter 30, The Deep Sea. The giant scorpion stirred slightly, seemingly sensing movement behind it. Samuel Cross had been staring intently at the massive creature. The moment its rhomboid-shaped pupils shifted, Samuel sprang into action. He suddenly crouched and lunged toward the giant scorpion, moving so fast that only a blur could be seen. Startled by Samuel's sudden charge, the giant scorpion raised its massive pincers to shield itself, while its steel-like tail lashed out toward Samuel. Samuel hadn't anticipated the scorpion's reaction to be so swift. Overestimating his own speed, he found himself still 4 or 5 meters away from the scorpion when its long tail was already upon him. Undeterred, Samuel pressed forward, swinging the longsword in his right hand fiercely toward the scorpion's tail, aiming to sever it. Clang! The tail clashed with the longsword. Despite Samuel's strength, the tail wasn't severed. However, the upper segment of the tail bent downward at the point of impact with the longsword. While it wasn't completely cut off, it was rendered useless. The force of the collision sent Samuel flying backward, blood trickling from the corners of his mouth. What a tough tail. The residual injuries within his body, forcibly suppressed until now, were jolted by the immense force, threatening to resurface. The giant scorpion let out a piercing screech. Though it saw Samuel knocked back, it dared not advance further. Samuel, supporting himself with the longsword, slowly stood up. A tiger fallen from grace is mocked even by dogs, he thought bitterly. Who would have imagined that even a giant scorpion would dare openly challenge him today? At that moment, a surge of powerful magical energy emanated from behind the scorpion. The creature abruptly turned to face the source, and Samuel also lifted his gaze. Adrian Long stood with his hands slightly apart in front of his chest. Between his palms floated a glowing talisman, crackling with electric sparks. It was a lightning element spell talisman, explaining why Adrian had taken so long to activate it. Adrian spread his hands apart and commanded, "Go." The glowing talisman, carrying streaks of electricity, shot swiftly toward the giant scorpion. Realizing the danger, the scorpion hurriedly raised its massive pincers to shield itself. Boom! The lightning talisman struck the giant scorpion, sending electric sparks flying in all directions, accompanied by the acrid smell of burning. The scorpion convulsed violently on the ground. A long crack appeared along its back. However, it wasn't dead yet. Its 6 legs clawed weakly at the ground, as though it was struggling to rise. The Long siblings immediately unleashed a flurry of attacks with their magical tools and spells. Watching their futile efforts, Samuel sighed and remarked, "Just throw another talisman like the one before." Adrian Long gave a wry smile and replied, "That was the last one." Susan Long glared at Samuel and snapped, "That was a divine lightning talisman. Do you have any idea how rare it is?" Samuel Cross sighed again. He paid no attention to Susan Long and instead gripped the long sword in his hand. He softly chanted, "The heavens and earth hold righteous energy, blending naturally into myriad forms. Below, it becomes rivers and mountains, above, it forms the sun and stars." After finishing the chant, he ran 2 fingers from his left hand along the blade. The longsword emitted a dragon's hum, and a faint spiritual glow appeared on its surface. This was the only sword incantation Samuel Cross knew, but at this moment, one was enough. Swinging the longsword, Samuel Cross leaped into the air and struck at the crack on the back of the giant scorpion. With a sharp thud, the longsword met slight resistance before plunging in up to the hilt. The giant scorpion's body trembled violently, and then its 6 legs gave out, falling motionless. Samuel Cross moved aside, sat cross-legged, and pulled out a bottle of elixirs, swallowing a few pills. He needed to suppress the worsening injuries within his body first. The golden-eyed condor landed in front of Samuel Cross, softly remarking, "I was wrong, completely wrong. Samuel Cross is unexpectedly a master." Samuel Cross irritably responded, "Scram." After regulating his breathing, Samuel Cross slowly opened his eyes. Susan Long immediately said, "I didn't even see how you struck. Why are you acting like you're gravely injured?" Adrian Long glared at Susan Long, then smiled apologetically at Samuel Cross. "Brother Samuel, are you all right? I have some excellent healing medicine if you need it." Samuel Cross smiled and shook his head. "I'm fine now." Then he pointed at the giant scorpion's corpse. "Don't you two want that?" Before Adrian Long could respond, Susan Long interjected, "My brother said the giant scorpion is yours since you killed it. But I think my brother's talisman was the key, so we should split it evenly." Samuel Cross chuckled and said, "Fine. Let's split it. I'll take the demon core, the rest is yours." A fiery red demon core the size of a pigeon egg rested in Samuel Cross's hand. He examined it briefly, before waving at the emerald-eyed condor. "Little Gray, come here." The emerald-eyed condor immediately flew over. Samuel Cross smiled and said, "Open your mouth." With that, he raised the demon core, intending to feed it to the emerald-eyed condor. The golden-eyed condor beside him urgently exclaimed, "No, no, you can't." Samuel Cross did not pay attention to it. However, the emerald-eyed condor also shook its head, seemingly unwilling to consume this demon pill. Samuel Cross found it strange. What was there to fear about eating a demon pill? The golden-eyed condor explained, "It's only at the second level, and you're asking it to eat a demon pill from a third-level beast. Isn't that just asking it to overstuff itself to death? I'd say half a pill would be more appropriate." Upon hearing this, Samuel Cross immediately exerted force and broke the demon pill in half. This time, without needing Samuel Cross to call, the emerald-eyed condor took the initiative to peck and swallow half of the pill. Its entire body then trembled, its eyes squinting slightly with an expression of immense satisfaction. Samuel Cross clenched his fist, intending to store the remaining half of the demon pill. The golden-eyed condor quickly interjected, "Hey, don't. The pill is already broken. Its spiritual energy will dissipate quickly. If you store it away, it'll just go to waste." Samuel Cross smiled and ultimately tossed the remaining half of the pill toward the golden-eyed condor, saying, "Great King, you're truly a nuisance. Next time you run away, don't bother coming back." The golden-eyed condor replied in its awkward tone, "No. Next time, we'll all run together." At this moment, Adrian Long brought over a large piece of carapace and placed it in front of Samuel Cross, saying, "Brother Samuel, this carapace from the demon beast is incredibly tough, perfect for crafting armor. You should take it." Samuel Cross smiled as he accepted the carapace, saying, "In that case, I won't hold back." With that, he stored the carapace into his storage pouch. This person seemed rather straightforward. Initially, when Susan Long had intended to secretly escape, Samuel Cross had already noticed. If they had truly fled at that time, he would have dealt with them first. Adrian Long chuckled and said, "Brother Samuel, it seems we're traveling the same path this time. My sister and I are also heading back to the city. It's a perfect opportunity to travel together." Samuel Cross's expression darkened. However, the surrounding scenery was even darker than his face. The ground was covered with a dense layer of tiny black insects, each the size of a grain of rice. Samuel Cross recognized these creatures. They were a type of insect beast called black-toed bugs. They were drawn to magical energy, whether from demons or humans. As long as it contained magical power, they would swarm toward it. Their level was extremely low, not even reaching the first rank, barely qualifying as insect beasts. Their bodies were not particularly tough either, and a single palm strike from Samuel Cross could kill hundreds or thousands of them. However, their numbers were truly overwhelming. The writhing black mass stretched out for miles. Samuel Cross turned to look at the Long siblings, who were panting heavily. Were these two born under a cursed star? He had traveled for months without encountering any demon beasts, but ever since meeting them, he had faced 2 incidents in just 2 days. Half a day ago, they had been fleeing from a third-level bear demon that shouldn't have appeared. The siblings had used their energy to lure Samuel Cross into escaping with them. During their escape, they were quickly discovered and pursued by the black-toed bugs. While the bugs couldn't fly very fast, they persistently followed, and their numbers kept growing. This led to the current situation. Now, the siblings could no longer fly, and the black-toed bugs were closing in rapidly. Samuel Cross looked at the eager swarm of insects, then turned to the golden-eyed condor and said, "Great King, it's time to feast." your food has arrived. Golden-eyed Condor sighed and said, Samuel Cross, this time you really can't blame me. I can eat bugs, but with this many, even if I eat until I'm full to death, I can't finish them all. Do you have any unfulfilled wishes? Speak up, and this great king will consider helping you achieve them. Samuel Cross chuckled and replied, my wish is something you can't fulfill. If you're so inclined, why not eat a bit more? If you can't finish, then take some with you. Golden-eyed Condor quickly shook his head and said, you want me to carry them away? Impossible, impossible. My magical power is too weak, I can't fly far. Samuel Cross turned to look at the Long family siblings and asked, Brother Long, do you have any life-saving techniques, like a fire signal or earth escape talisman? Adrian Long gave a bitter smile and said, no, we didn't expect such trouble so close to the city. From his tone, it seemed like the things Samuel Cross mentioned might really exist, but he simply didn't have them on hand. Samuel Cross sighed and said, all right then. Kill them. Killing one breaks even, killing two is profit. Right now, we're making an extremely profitable deal. Cheer up. With that, he stepped forward, crushing hundreds of black-toed bugs underfoot. The Long family siblings, whose bodies were not as sturdy as Samuel Cross's, could only use their weapons to strike. Unfortunately, while these weapons were effective for killing, they were not very useful against such a massive swarm of bugs. Samuel Cross continued heading forward, in the direction of Copper River City. Though the hope was slim, if they could encounter 3 or 4 Foundation establishment cultivators, the difficult situation would be easily resolved. The Long family siblings soon found themselves unable to hold on. Despite continuously consuming medicinal pills, their magical power depletion outpaced their recovery, leaving them no choice but to follow closely behind Samuel Cross. Meanwhile, Samuel Cross was still carrying 2 large spheres in his arms, Golden-eyed Condor and Emerald-eyed Condor, who were drooling from overeating, so stuffed they could no longer move. This time, Golden-eyed Condor surprisingly didn't take the opportunity to fly away. Samuel Cross was a bit surprised. If they were all going to die, it wasn't worth dragging these 2 along to perish with him. Unfortunately, before he could stop them, the 2 birds had already eaten so much, they were too round to fly. After walking a bit further, Samuel Cross himself began to feel exhausted. If he were at full strength, he wouldn't need any special methods, just rolling a few times on the ground would be enough to wipe out the bugs. Or he could take out his flame blower to incinerate the entire swarm. At worst, he could muster his energy and persist until reaching Copper River City. Unexpectedly, after fleeing for 7 or 8 months, he still ended up facing death. In hindsight, he might as well have returned to Wind Origin City, smeared some ash on his face, changed his clothes, and perhaps no one would have recognized him. Just as Samuel Cross was about to disregard his injuries and put all his strength into a desperate fight, he suddenly heard a low shout near his ear, tornado of shattered clouds. A small tornado, about 10 zhang high, suddenly rose from somewhere, howling as it rushed forward. The nearby black chitin bugs were swept into the wind, grinding against each other until they shattered. In the wake of the tornado, only a trail of insect corpses remained. The black chitin bugs that hadn't been caught in the wind quickly spread their wings, attempting to fly away. However, as soon as they took off, they were swiftly pulled into the whirlwind. In no time, the swarm of bugs that had once darkened the sky had turned into a scattered heap of lifeless bodies. Samuel Cross and his 2 companions were both relieved and astonished at the sight. What deity had passed by to lend a helping hand? The tornado quickly dissipated, and the 3 of them looked around but saw no one in sight. Suddenly, Samuel Cross had a hunch and looked up. In the sky, he spotted a small black dot that vanished in an instant. Who could it have been? Unable to figure it out and unwilling to dwell on it, Samuel Cross reached into his chest and pulled out the plump, round golden-eyed condor, saying, "Great King, do you enjoy eating bugs? If you do, I'll pack some for you." The golden-eyed condor chirped, "Pack? Packing is great. Make sure to add some soy sauce." Samuel Cross followed the path of the tornado, sweeping up the insect corpses on the ground into his storage pouch as he went. His storage pouch was top tier, with an enormous internal space. Meanwhile, the Long family siblings, still shaken from their narrow escape, watched in amazement as Samuel Cross collected the mountain of black kite and bug corpses into his pouch. Once everything was done, Samuel Cross sat cross-legged on the ground. This time, his injuries weren't severe, but he had expended a significant amount of magical energy. He needed to recover first. The Long family siblings also sat down cross-legged. They weren't injured either, but they too had drained much of their magical energy. Copper River City. Copper River City was somewhat different from other cities. Near this city was a purple copper ore vein. This area produced a large amount of purple copper, hence the name Copper River. Since purple copper was a decent material for crafting magical artifacts, the city was also renowned for its artifact crafting. As Samuel Cross entered the city, far away in Wind Origin City, over 200,000 li away, in a pavilion, a woman dressed in a loose white and purple robe saw a golden leaf appear in the small formation before her. She quickly picked up the golden leaf and infused it with magical energy. The leaf promptly displayed a few words: "The person has entered the city, no cause for concern." Upon entering the city, Samuel Cross headed straight for the Spirit Gathering Tower. He didn't know the way, but the tower was so tall it could be seen from a distance. As for the Long family siblings, he had already found an excuse to part ways with them before entering the city. They were too unlucky, it was best not to get involved with them any further, especially since he still had a murder case hanging over his head. After handing over his spirit stones and entering the secret chamber of the Spirit Gathering Tower, Samuel Cross could finally focus on healing his injuries. The devastating strike that could have blown him to pieces had severely damaged his body, but it had also caused his flesh and blood to fully integrate with his demon mark. Now, he could freely manipulate the demon mark at will. Under the support of spiritual energy, after more than half a year, Samuel Cross's injuries finally healed completely, and his cultivation even advanced slightly. Inside the secret chamber, the demonic patterns on Samuel Cross's body fully surfaced on his skin. These patterns did not make him appear more menacing, instead, they exuded an unusual sense of composure, with each pattern radiating strength. For over half a year, the golden-eyed condor had been restless to the point of madness. Samuel Cross had remained in this small secret chamber, first to heal his injuries, and then to continue cultivating. It seemed he had no intention of stepping outside until he completely exhausted his spirit stones. Seeing Samuel Cross finally complete a full cycle of energy circulation, the golden-eyed condor immediately spoke up, "Samuel Cross. Go outside already. It's too dark and stifling in here." Samuel Cross smiled and said, "Weren't you the one who wanted to come in here before? The spiritual energy here is so dense." The golden-eyed condor replied, "No, it's suffocating. Honestly, even if you cultivate to the core formation stage and release the little fox, she wouldn't remember you." The smile on Samuel Cross's face vanished. He asked with suspicion, "Why?" The golden-eyed condor explained, "She once split her soul into two parts, the main and the subordinate. Naturally, her main soul was sealed within the magical artifact you possess. The one who lived with you was merely the subordinate soul she divided. On that day, to save you, she severely depleted her vitality, and her subordinate soul has long since dissipated." Samuel Cross fell silent. He had vaguely sensed this before. After a long while, Samuel Cross finally laughed and said, "No matter what, I must fulfill the promise I made to her. If you feel stifled, next month, when I extend the time, I'll take you outside." Tornado of shattered clouds. Samuel Cross shouted softly, and a small tornado immediately appeared in front of him. Nearly 10,000 spirit stones from Andrew Turner's storage bag had been completely used up, and Samuel Cross's cultivation had finally reached the middle stage of the Foundation establishment realm. He then temporarily paused his cultivation to study Phoenix Resolve. The back of Phoenix Resolve contained inscriptions. After he advanced to the middle stage of foundation establishment, 2 spells appeared on a metallic page: basic wind evasion technique and tornado of shattered clouds. He was still studying the wind evasion technique, but he had witnessed the power of tornado of shattered clouds before. With just this one move, he had wiped out an entire swarm of black seal insects. After half a month of effort, he had finally succeeded in casting it today. This wind element spell was indeed very challenging. Leaving the spirit gathering tower, Samuel Cross headed straight to the city gates. He intended to take on the bounty for the demon core of the 5 elemental beasts listed on the reward board. Currently out of spirit stones, continuing his cultivation was simply impossible. However, to Samuel Cross's frustration, the bounty for the 5 elemental beasts demon core had been cancelled at some point. Left with no choice, Samuel Cross turned toward the bustling marketplace within the city. Large cities always had trading hubs, and items like the demon core of a 5 elemental beast were best handled through such marketplaces. At the appraisal hall of the marketplace, Samuel Cross casually stepped into a room isolated by a formation. Behind a long table sat an elderly man with silver hair. Despite only being at the spirit refining stage, the old man showed no respect for Samuel Cross, an advanced cultivator. He didn't even bother to stand up and merely said indifferently, "Kid, do you have something to auction or sell?" Samuel Cross did not waste words, nodded, and took out the demon core of the 5 elemental beast, saying, "I would like to ask you to appraise this." The elderly man with snow-white hair, initially indifferent, took a deep breath the moment he saw the demon core in Samuel Cross's hand. He did not dare to reach out and take it but instead moved closer to observe it several times before saying, "Oh, sir, esteemed senior, please wait a moment. I will immediately call the manager." With that, he stumbled to his feet, passed through a small door at the back, and hurried out. Shortly after, a slightly chubby middle-aged man strode in. He was at the late stage of foundation establishment, with a round, plump face, crowded facial features that looked somewhat comical. Upon entering, he immediately bowed and said, "Oh. Please have a seat, please have a seat. So, this esteemed fellow Taoist is the one who possesses that demon core?" #### Chapter 31, Market District. Samuel Cross smiled, extended his palm, and presented the demonic core to the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man immediately widened his eyes in astonishment. He carefully lifted the demonic core with 2 fingers and placed it in his palm for closer inspection. At that moment, a young maid in a green dress with delicate features emerged from the small door, serving fragrant tea to both men before quickly retreating. Samuel Cross sat down beside the tea table, picked up the fragrant tea, and took a sip. He had already detected the dense spiritual energy emanating from the tea earlier. Free things like this were always to his liking. After a long while, the middle-aged man nodded excitedly and said, "Indeed, this is the demonic core of the 5 elemental beast. Unfortunately, the beast hasn't reached maturity." Samuel Cross chuckled and replied, "If it were too powerful, how could I have obtained it?" The middle-aged man, who had been mumbling to himself, quickly looked up and smiled upon hearing Samuel Cross speak. Right. May I ask if you wish to sell it directly or through an auction?" Samuel Cross pondered and asked, "How much are you offering for a direct purchase? And if auctioned, approximately how much could it fetch?" The middle-aged man thought for a moment before replying, "Our establishment is willing to offer 45,000 spirit stones for a direct purchase. If auctioned, we will take a 10% commission. The starting price can be set at 30,000. Let me say this, while such an item is valuable, finding the right buyer at the right time is uncertain. It might sell for twice as much, but if luck isn't on your side." Without much hesitation, Samuel Cross said, "I'll go with the auction." Someone had once been willing to offer 50,000 as a bounty for such an item. It clearly had a market. He decided to take a gamble. The middle-aged man nodded and smiled, Good. He then handed Samuel Cross a jade token engraved with a symbol and said, "Your demonic core will be auctioned 3 days from now. This jade token serves as proof for you to collect the spirit stones from the auction. You can also use it to attend the auction directly, so be careful not to lose it. Samuel Cross accepted the jade token, clasped his hands in gratitude, and said, "Thank you." With that, he turned and left. 3 days later, Samuel Cross arrived at the auction hall on time. The auction hall was a vast dome-shaped chamber. In the center was a floating high platform, surrounded by tiered seating. Each seat featured a massive stone figure, about 5 or 6 feet tall and 3 feet wide, all identical in appearance with arms and legs. Samuel Cross was startled to realize that he, too, had been transformed into one of these stone figures with limbs. It turned out that the auction hall used a special formation to modify the voices and appearances of all attendees to ensure anonymity. Samuel Cross casually found a seat. On the high platform, a middle-aged man was holding an item and loudly announcing, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is a rare auxiliary artifact crafted from nether jade, a calligraphy inkstone that preserves the warmth of water. Using this inkstone to hold water, combined with beast blood and cinnabar for talisman crafting, can significantly increase success rates. The starting price is 60,000 spirit stones, with a minimum increment of 5,000 per bid. Let the auction begin." The inkstone is a tool used to pour water into the ink slab in a study room. Unexpectedly, someone turned this item into a magical artifact and managed to sell it at such a high price. Following the inkstone, there were also brush washers, silver beans, spindles, silver trays, copper scissors, painting scrolls, weights, jade rings, earrings, masks, sculptures, scented sachets, and teapots. Samuel Cross was amazed. Artifact refiners truly did not limit themselves to traditional forms, and the variety of magical artifacts was so vast that it seemed to include almost everything. If the auctioneer had brought out a golden chamber pot at that moment, claiming it could emit a fragrance to repel enemies, Samuel Cross wouldn't have found it strange at all. Finally, Samuel Cross awaited the 5 elemental beast core he had been anticipating. The auctioneer announced loudly, "Ladies and gentlemen, I believe you are all familiar with the 5 elemental beast and the uses of their demon cores. Our auction house has just received a consignment. A demon core of the 5 elemental beast is up for auction." As soon as the words were spoken, the crowd burst into excited chatter. The auctioneer continued, "Our house has verified this demon core, guaranteeing its authenticity. It is a genuine dual-colored 5 elemental core." With that, he turned and took a jade box from the tray held by a young woman behind him, gently opening the lid. Many attendees had only heard of the 5 elemental beast cores, but had never seen one before, so they craned their necks to get a clear look. Seeing the crowd's interest, the auctioneer raised his voice. "Previously, someone offered a bounty of 50,000 spirit stones to acquire a 5 elemental core. But today, no need for 50,000. Not even 40,000. Not even 30,000. The starting bid for this 5 elemental beast core is just 30,000 spirit stones. Don't miss your chance. Each bid increment is 5,000. 35,000 spirit stones. 40,000. 45,000. This bid came from Samuel Cross himself. Since others were already bidding, he thought he might as well help drive the price up a bit. Sure enough, another voice quickly followed, 50,000 spirit stones. Samuel Cross felt relieved. Initially, he had considered accepting the bounty offer, but with the price already reaching 50,000, he no longer needed to intervene and could let the others compete. Perhaps Copper River City had many artifact refiners, and for those who could integrate the 5 elemental beast core into a set of magical artifacts, it was worth spending the money. In the end, the 5 elemental beast core was sold for 75,000 spirit stones, more than doubling its initial price. Samuel Cross stepped out of the auction house, his hand still fiddling with an inkstone shaped like a toad. The jade item was less than half a foot long, under 3 inches tall, with a hollow belly, mouth open toward the sky, a 3-legged body, round eyes, and a back adorned with intricate grass patterns. At the center of its back was a small protruding hole, seemingly designed for pouring water. Upon seeing this inkstone, Samuel Cross immediately thought of the sorceress Emma Stoner. She had saved his life once, and this unique item seemed like the perfect gift for her. After earning over 60,000 spirit stones from selling a demon core, he purchased this unsold magical artifact. Wind Origin City. In a tavern for cultivators, Samuel Cross sat alone, pouring himself wine. He had arrived half a day ago via a teleportation array and had just sent a message talisman to Emma Stoner. If she was in the city, she would surely receive it. Samuel's current appearance had been altered, the demonic patterns on his face now varied in intensity, making his complexion look mottled and unrecognizable from before. Suddenly, a figure appeared at the top of the staircase, a woman dressed in black. She wore a conical hat wrapped with a layer of black gauze that obscured her face. The moment she appeared, she swiftly approached Samuel's table, slightly lifting the black gauze and whispering, "Why have you returned? Follow me." With that, she turned and descended the stairs. This woman was Emma Stoner, though her peculiar attire surprised Samuel Cross. Could she have run into trouble as well? Placing a few spirit stones on the table, Samuel quietly followed Emma out. They passed through several deserted streets and entered a quiet alley. Emma slipped through the back door of a house. Samuel, after ensuring there was no movement around, quickly followed her inside. Once Emma shut the door, Samuel wiped his hand across his face, revealing his original appearance. Smiling, he asked, "Why are you dressed like this? Did you run into some kind of trouble?" Emma shook her head and led Samuel toward a building, speaking as they walked. "You're quite bold. Don't you know that tavern belongs to the Turner family?" Samuel was slightly taken aback, he genuinely didn't know. Emma continued, "The Turner family's most talented disciple, Nathan Turner, disappeared after pursuing you and never returned. Many people saw your face at the city gate back then. Fortunately, no one in the city knows you, so they couldn't trace you. But they gave up too quickly. Just a few days after Nathan Turner went missing, no one asked about it anymore. I find it rather strange." Samuel smiled and said, "I'm not afraid. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come back." Emma, surprised, asked, "Did you come back to seek revenge on the Turner family?" Samuel Cross shook his head with a smile and said, "I don't have such complicated thoughts. I saw an item that I thought you could use, so I bought it as a gift for you. Consider it a small repayment for your life-saving grace." After speaking, he took out a frog-shaped inkstone. Emma Stoner seemed like she wanted to say something, but the moment she saw the inkstone, she immediately accepted it. Her face lit up with delight, clearly showing how much she liked it. After a while, Emma Stoner continued, "Your aptitude seems pretty decent. Last time we parted, you were still at the early foundation establishment stage, but now you've reached the mid-stage. And during that time, you were even seriously injured." Samuel Cross scratched his nose and said, "Aptitude aside, I got here by burning through spirit stones. I must have spent nearly 10,000 of them on cultivation. Of course, to someone like you, that's probably just a pile of talismans." Emma Stoner chuckled and said, "I don't use talismans every single day. So, what are your plans for the future?" Samuel Cross glanced around and asked, "Is this building yours?" Emma Stoner shook her head and replied, "No, but I can stay here indefinitely." Samuel Cross said, "We've been here for a while, and no one else has shown up. Are you living here alone?" Emma Stoner's eyes flickered as she nodded, "Yes." Samuel Cross leaned in and lowered his voice, "Then I have to ask." "Go ahead." Samuel Cross whispered, "How do you earn so many spirit stones? Teach me." Emma Stoner was momentarily stunned before replying, "Spirit stones? I draw talismans." Samuel Cross looked doubtful, "Drawing talismans? How much can a talisman scroll even sell for?" Emma Stoner replied, "Well, you could also go hunting for spirit beasts." Samuel Cross said, "All right. Teach me how to draw talismans. I want to earn money. You don't know, I'm dirt poor right now. Creating talismans naturally requires talent. Samuel Cross's talent was quite average, and he could only earn a small amount of hard-earned money. His success rate for creating talismans fluctuated between 50 to 60%. Samuel Cross couldn't understand why Emma Stoner could casually draw a talisman on a piece of paper and succeed, while he had to hold his breath and concentrate for a long time, even bearing the risk of failure. Samuel Cross couldn't help but sigh. Talent, this intangible thing, sometimes truly outweighs effort. Some people seem to progress daily even with minimal study. Emma Stoner looked at the dejected Samuel Cross and said with a smile, "Actually, you're not doing too badly. Some people can't even achieve a 30% success rate." Samuel Cross frowned, shook his head, and sighed, "Hearing that from you really doesn't sound convincing at all." Emma Stoner covered her mouth and chuckled softly, "I've never held back anything. Every method I know, I've taught you. Quite a few are even secret techniques." Samuel Cross smiled and said, "We've been through life and death situations together. How could I not trust you? But I've decided to leave this place." Hearing this, Emma Stoner was startled. Her expression changed slightly, and she quickly asked, Where do you plan to go?" Samuel Cross scratched his nose and said, "I've been freeloading here for over half a year. I guess I've graduated now. As they say, a teacher opens the door, but the practice is up to the individual." Emma Stoner continued staring into Samuel Cross's eyes and asked, "Where do you want to go?" Samuel Cross hesitated for a moment before saying, "Who knows? Hunting spirit beasts, earning spirit stones, cultivating." Emma Stoner nodded and said, "I'll go hunting spirit beasts with you." Samuel Cross smiled. His smile was a bit peculiar. He shook his head lightly and said, "You don't need to come." After speaking, his figure flickered and he was already at the door of the building. Emma Stoner stood in a daze, quickly forming a hand seal. Outside the building, a faint light barrier appeared. It was a restriction array. Once activated, no one could enter from the outside, nor leave from the inside. However, Samuel Cross had already exited the building. Standing outside, he waved and said, "I'm leaving. If I have money, I'll send you a letter with my flying sword." With that, his figure flickered and disappeared from the large building. Emma Stoner stood there in a daze. She only saw Samuel Cross's lips move, but could not hear what he said. The defensive array was too strong, even sound couldn't penetrate it. The moment Samuel Cross left the building, two birds flew down from the sky, the golden-eyed condor and the emerald-eyed condor. The golden-eyed condor said, "Samuel Cross, you've finally come out. I was about to die of boredom. The building may have good food and comfort, but it still feels like a cage." Samuel Cross laughed and said, "You're a bird, of course, you wouldn't like a cage." Golden-eyed condor said, "Could it be that you humans actually like cages?" Samuel Cross laughed and replied, "Who knows?" Walking along the main road, Samuel Cross suddenly remembered that he hadn't disguised his face. Fortunately, no one around seemed to notice. He turned into an alley, rubbed his hands over his face, altering his appearance slightly. Even though the Turner family was still searching for him, it wouldn't be such a coincidence to run into them here, would it? Continuing toward the city gate, Samuel Cross walked while carefully contemplating. Over the past 6 months of drawing talismans, he had gained some insights into magic. It was time to head outside the city and test them out. The journey was uneventful. After traveling a few hundred miles away from the city, a streak of white light suddenly shot across the horizon, creating an astonishing spectacle. Startled by the commotion, Samuel Cross looked up and thought to himself, "This kid must be a rookie. Flaunting their presence like this in the wilderness, aren't they afraid of attracting beasts or malicious individuals?" Just as he was mulling this over, the streak of white light abruptly changed direction, speeding straight toward him, moving even faster than before. Samuel Cross was taken aback, feeling a twinge of unease. Could this person be coming for him? While he was still uncertain, the figure in the sky descended right in front of him. It was a young man, about Samuel Cross's age, dressed in the attire of the White family. The man stared at Samuel Cross for a moment, before suddenly laughing loudly, "Ha! So it really is you. Did you think you could escape? As he spoke, a flash of light appeared in his hand, revealing a gleaming broadsword. Gripping the weapon tightly, the young man swung it directly at Samuel Cross. Samuel Cross sidestepped, narrowly avoiding the horizontal slash, and simultaneously threw a punch, striking the man's sword hand. Bang! A loud clash resounded. Samuel Cross felt as though his fist had hit solid iron. The man's grip was remarkably firm, and his body was as resilient as Samuel Cross's own. Now truly surprised, Samuel Cross realized he had underestimated his opponent. He had intended to disarm the man, but didn't expect him to also be a body-refining cultivator. His calculation had been wrong. The young man coldly declared, "I am Billy Turner. Nathan Turner was my friend. Now you should understand why I'm here, shouldn't you?" Inwardly, Billy was also secretly alarmed. Though his hand appeared steady, it was actually trembling slightly. This man's fist was incredibly strong. Samuel Cross nodded and said, "Then there's nothing left to say." As he spoke, his figure flickered and appeared behind the person, delivering a punch to their back. The opponent had already discovered his movements, making it hard to ensure that the Turner family wouldn't find out. He needed to resolve this quickly. Speaking of which, it seems that no matter where you go, you always run into someone from the White family. Billy Turner, though fully focused, still could not anticipate Samuel Cross's incredible speed. By the time he realized Samuel Cross had circled behind him, it was too late to dodge. He could only grit his teeth and endure Samuel's punch. Boom! Billy Turner took a step forward, steadied himself, and immediately turned to slash with his blade. Samuel Cross was astonished that Billy Turner, after taking his full-powered punch, seemed completely unfazed. Moreover, Billy's reaction was swift. His blade grazed Samuel's chest, leaving a bloody gash. The blade was incredibly sharp. Samuel leaped back several meters, staring intently at Billy Turner. Frustration churned within him. His opponent's weapon was razor-sharp, while his own usable tools were limited to a low-tier flying sword and a flame blower. The flame blower relied on fire-based magic, which Samuel was not proficient in. Thinking of this, Samuel cursed the demon clan from years ago. If they hadn't taken his talisman treasure, he wouldn't have to fear this young man now. Billy Turner didn't care what Samuel Cross was thinking. He lowered his stance, drew his blade behind his back, and suddenly charged forward. In an instant, he was right in front of Samuel. Taking a step forward, he swung his blade from behind his back with lightning speed. Using the momentum and force of his charge, the slash was impossibly fast. Samuel had no chance to evade. He could only tense his abdomen as the blade sliced his stomach, leaving a deep wound. That immediately gushed blood. Seeing his strike land successfully, Billy Turner moved to deliver another slash. However, Samuel Cross suddenly disappeared before his eyes. Alarmed, Billy instinctively swung his blade in a circular motion, slashing behind him. But Samuel Cross didn't appear behind Billy, instead, he emerged beneath him. Pressing his back to the ground, Samuel used both legs to kick upward with full force. Boom! Billy Turner was sent flying, nearly spitting bile. Samuel then darted behind Billy and delivered a fierce punch. Boom! Both fighters collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. Though Samuel was drenched in blood, Billy's pale face showed he wasn't faring much better. Samuel tore a piece of his clothing and tightly wrapped it around the wound on his abdomen. Though the injuries hadn't reached his internal organs, continuing to fight would inevitably worsen them. The wind evasion technique consumed too much energy. During training, it hadn't seemed like a problem, but in real combat, repeatedly using it was taking a toll on his body. Samuel sighed quietly. Whoosh! Billy Turner, still staring intently at Samuel, suddenly felt a gust of wind behind his neck. Startled, he quickly tilted his head to dodge. A gray shadow flashed by and disappeared. Samuel's eyes lit up with joy. Those two little helpers had finally returned. Billy had a great blade, but Samuel now had two reinforcements, perfectly balancing the scales. With this in mind, Samuel seized the opportunity and charged forward. #### Chapter 32, The 32nd Return, Mundane Life. Billy Turner didn't give Samuel Cross a chance to dodge, instantly swinging his blade and performing a dazzling flourish. The blade was incredibly sharp, leaving Samuel Cross no choice but to retreat. Billy Turner then looked around in surprise. The gray shadow earlier seemed like a sparrow, but its speed was clearly beyond that of an ordinary bird. Was there a demonic beast here? Why was the person opposite completely unharmed? Clang! Something struck Billy Turner's back. Startled, he turned around but saw nothing. Samuel Cross sighed. The golden-eyed condor and emerald-eyed condor obviously couldn't break through this person's defense. By attacking directly like that, this person would become less guarded against them. Right after sighing, Samuel Cross darted into the nearby forest. Billy Turner quickly understood the situation, ignoring the gray shadow flitting back and forth. Gripping his large blade tightly, he chased after Samuel Cross. One ahead, one behind, the two quickly disappeared into the woods. The forest was dense, but Billy Turner kept his eyes locked on Samuel Cross's figure. If the opponent wanted to compete in endurance, he had no fear. Suddenly, Samuel Cross shouted, "Tornado of shattered clouds." As the four words echoed, a small tornado over 2 meters tall appeared, enveloping Billy Turner along with fallen leaves and surrounding debris. Although startled, Billy Turner remained composed. A radiant glow flashed around him, and his body, already as hard as steel, gained an additional protective aura. However, Billy Turner soon realized that the power of the tornado of shattered clouds wasn't as strong as he had anticipated. Glancing at the swirling leaves and debris, he suddenly gripped his large blade and began swinging it amidst the wind. If the spell lacked lethal force, could the opponent be planning a sneak attack? The tornado of shattered clouds deserved its reputation as an advanced spell, maintaining its form for an impressive duration. Billy Turner silently marveled. Yet, a smirk crept onto his face. His blade techniques were flawless, leaving no openings. Even someone with a higher cultivation level than his would have to avoid his sharp strikes. How could his opponent dare approach? Wildfire ravages the plains. A cold voice reached Billy Turner's ears. Moments later, he saw flames erupt like a sea of flowers around him. Samuel Cross had led Billy Turner into the forest and expended much magical energy casting the relatively harmless tornado of shattered clouds to obstruct his vision and make him focus on guarding against a potential sneak attack. Now, it was time to close the net. The power of wildfire ravages the plains, paired with the flame blower, was something Samuel Cross had experienced before. At that time, even flowing water had nearly evaporated. How could Billy Turner, with no cover, survive? The raging fire turned the forest into a sea of flames. When the blaze finally subsided, the ground was left charred and blackened. Samuel Cross stood beside Billy Turner's charred corpse. Billy Turner probably never imagined that Samuel Cross could wield the flame blower of the Turner family, all thanks to Emma Stoner. Emma Stoner, truly a mysterious woman. What was she doing now? Samuel Cross suddenly shook his head. This wasn't the time to think about such matters. Being so close to Wind Origin City, it was best to leave quickly. Using the flame blower to sift through the ashes, Samuel Cross retrieved Billy Turner's storage pouch. He then bent down to pick up the large blade that gleamed with a cold light. This was truly a treasure, capable of easily breaking through his defenses. With this in hand, future battles would no longer be a worry. At that moment, an unexpected incident occurred. The large blade, now without its owner, suddenly sprang up on its own and pierced straight into Samuel Cross's chest. Samuel Cross, caught off guard and unprepared for such a situation, was impaled by the massive blade. The blade, after penetrating his chest, transformed into a streak of golden light and soared into the sky. Was it a spirit-bound artifact? A secret technique? Or perhaps a sentient magical weapon? Samuel Cross didn't know. His chest bore a gaping wound, blood flowing profusely, with half of his internal organs pierced. Unbelievable. He had schemed against his opponent, yet even in death, his opponent managed to turn the tables on him one last time. Samuel Cross found it laughable. Could he truly be killed by someone who was already dead? Samuel Cross. Samuel Cross. He heard someone calling his name and slowly opened his eyes. The golden-eyed condor said, "Samuel Cross, stop sleeping here. Get up." Samuel Cross was stunned. He only remembered falling to the ground in despair, his will to live extinguished. Could it be that he wasn't dead yet? He looked down at himself. The large hole in his chest was still there, but the bleeding had stopped. A small pool of blood remained on the ground. In astonishment, he muttered, "Why am I still alive?" The golden-eyed condor replied, "If you were dead, how would you be able to talk? Are you an idiot?" Samuel Cross looked down again at the gaping wound in his chest. He could faintly see his damaged internal organs being wrapped by threads of golden and black silk. His magical energy was continuously being drawn into these threads to heal his injuries. Was this some sort of demonic body? Or perhaps the Vajra demon subduing spell? He couldn't figure it out, but he struggled to stand. However, as soon as he moved, fresh blood gushed from his wound. Smiling bitterly, he turned to the golden-eyed condor and the emerald-eyed condor and said, "Can you two carry me while flying?" Midnight. Luodong City. Although the curfew in Luodong City had been lifted, at this hour, the only people wandering the streets were thieves and night watchmen. No, there was one other type of person, the wealthy young masters leaving the pleasure houses. The city walls of Luodong were tall, but not as tall as the ancient red pine tree standing several dozen meters outside the city. At the top of the towering red pine, a shadow darted across. "Samuel Cross, you owe me a huge favor for this. You'll have to repay it someday," the golden-eyed condor said, panting heavily. It, along with the emerald-eyed condor, had carried Samuel Cross for thousands of miles, flying and resting in turns along the way. The journey had been grueling. Samuel Cross laughed and said, "This is nothing. One day, I'll carry you for 100,000 miles. The golden-eyed condor grumbled irritably, "Forget it. You miser." Suddenly, Samuel Cross noticed a figure below and said, "Stop, stop." Golden-eyed condor and emerald-eyed condor immediately stopped. Samuel Cross said, "Down there, see it? Land next to the dead man." Golden-eyed condor replied, "What's so interesting about a dead man?" Yet, it still obediently flew down. On the ground lay a corpse, face up, with only a faint trace of deathly aura lingering around him, indicating he hadn't been dead for long. The man appeared to be around 21 or 22 years old, with a delicate appearance, though his face looked haggard, seemingly due to overindulgence in wine and women. Samuel Cross lifted the body for inspection and turned to golden-eyed condor, saying, "Great king, look, do we resemble each other?" Golden-eyed condor said, "Yes, both have 2 eyes, 1 mouth, and even a nose." Samuel Cross was speechless. Pointing to his own face, he said, "I meant facial features." Golden-eyed condor, irritated, replied, "Samuel Cross, if I summoned a flock of crows, could you tell them apart? Humans are the same, either fat or thin. How am I supposed to distinguish them?" Samuel Cross fell silent. He immediately stripped the young man of his clothes and dressed himself in them, then instructed golden-eyed condor and emerald-eyed condor, "Take this corpse and dispose of it in the wasteland." Golden-eyed condor seemed to understand and said, "You intend to disguise yourself as this man to infiltrate the mortal city and recover?" Samuel Cross nodded, "Exactly. Recently, we've encountered several groups of cultivators. I'm not sure if they're searching for me, but flying around aimlessly like this is no longer safe." Meanwhile, Randy was anxiously searching everywhere. He had secretly followed the young master, but after dozing off for just a moment, the young master had vanished. Upon questioning Madame Song, he learned that the young master had left Listening Rain Pavilion early in the morning. If he didn't return before dawn, the master of the house would surely notice. At that point, not only would the young master be punished, but Randy himself would not escape severe consequences. At a loss for what to do, he suddenly noticed someone standing at the corner of the street. Wasn't that his young master? Overjoyed, Randy hurried over and exclaimed, "Young master, I've finally found you. Let's head back quickly, it's already the second watch of the night." With that, he grabbed the person and dashed off. However, this person was not Randy's young master, but Samuel Cross. Samuel Cross used a slight illusion technique, not enough to fool a cultivator, but more than sufficient to deceive ordinary mortals. Since Samuel Cross didn't know the voice of the deceased, he could only lower his voice and say, "No need to rush, it's still early." Randy replied, "Young master, it's not early anymore. This morning, the master said he wanted to test your poetry and literature. Have you forgotten?" Samuel Cross responded, "My throat is a bit sore, and I can't speak clearly. How could I possibly recite poetry and literature?" Randy gave a bitter smile. "Young master, you used that excuse the last time." Samuel Cross said, "Fine. I've got it. I forgot. I've forgotten everything. Who are you? Who am I? Who is the master? I've forgotten it all." Randy was taken aback. Oh? This approach might actually work. As they spoke, they arrived at the back wall of a large mansion, where a ladder was set up. Randy said, "Young master, let me go in first. If there's nothing wrong, I'll call for you." Samuel Cross didn't need him to check. He had already heard the sound of heavy breathing behind the wall and said, "No need. I'll go up myself." With that, he climbed the wall using both hands and feet. On the other side of the wall, there was another ladder. As Samuel Cross descended, he saw an old man with graying hair and a beard, his expression furious. The old man shouted, "You scoundrel! Sneaking out again, let's see who'll protect you this time. Beat him. Beat him hard." As soon as the old man finished speaking, several servants wielding long sticks began to strike Samuel Cross. Pretending to fall to the ground, Samuel Cross allowed the sticks to rain down on him. After all, these blows wouldn't hurt him, and he could even use this beating to heal his own injuries. "Stop. Stop. Master. Master. Sammy is weak. If you beat him like this, how can he endure it?" A middle-aged woman in a brocade robe, nearly 40 years old, rushed into the courtyard. Before she finished speaking, she had already thrown herself in front of Samuel Cross to shield him from the blows. Samuel Cross thought to himself, "Oh, so my name is Sammy. But I still don't know my surname." The old man angrily said, "Humph. No more beating. Look at the time. This scoundrel reeks of alcohol, he must have been drinking at some flower house again. It's all because you've spoiled him." Despite his words, the old man indeed ordered the servants to stop. The woman choked back her tears and said, "He used to be such a good child, but you insisted on forcing him to study and pursue scholarly honors. That's why he's become like this. Think about how wonderful he was just a few years ago." The old man retorted, "If he doesn't study, what else is he supposed to do all day? Idle around raising fish and setting birds free?" Samuel Cross truly didn't want to listen to this nonsense any longer. He leaned to the side, rolled his eyes, and pretended to faint. Seeing this, the woman stopped arguing with the old man and hurriedly called out, "Quick! Quickly help the young master back to his room. You, go call the doctor. You, prepare some chicken soup. And the rest of you who knocked the young master unconscious, get out of the Turner family immediately." Samuel Cross felt frustrated inside. Why did it have to be the Turner family? After all, his injury was caused by that brat Andrew Turner. The servants holding the long sticks inwardly complained. They had already been very gentle, the sticks barely touched him before being lifted away. It sounded dramatic, but in truth, it wasn't painful at all. Samuel Cross was carried to the bed. The woman by his bedside wiped her tears while rambling on. Unable to endure her chatter any longer, Samuel Cross had no choice but to open his eyes and stiffly call out, "Mother! The woman was overjoyed and quickly said, "Oh, you're awake? Lie down, quickly, lie down. You almost scared me to death just now." However, the woman suddenly froze. "I'm not your mother." "And your voice?" Samuel Cross was startled. How could she not be? Wasn't she just lamenting about his misfortune earlier? Without hesitation, Samuel Cross reached out and lightly tapped the back of her neck, knocking her unconscious. At that moment, two maids pushed the door open and entered. Each carried a tray, one with a porcelain pot emitting a fragrant aroma, and the other with a bowl of medicine. Samuel Cross glanced at the two maids and pointed at the unconscious middle-aged woman by the bed, saying, "She's tired. Take her back." The two maids exchanged glances, set the trays down, and carefully supported the woman, one on each side, as they slowly walked out. The young master is truly cold-hearted. He didn't even call her stepmother. Did you see how he looked at the second madam as if she were a stranger? "Shoo, keep your voice down." Samuel Cross nodded thoughtfully. Ah, so she was the stepmother. Just then, there was a sound from the window as a bird flew in, followed by another. It was the golden-eyed condor and the emerald-eyed condor. Samuel Cross said, "Why are you two so slow?" Golden-eyed condor said, "So many cultivators, flying everywhere." Samuel Cross, "I think 9 out of 10 of them are looking for you." Samuel Cross asked, "Oh? How do you know?" Golden-eyed condor replied, "They mentioned the name Billy Turner. He's someone from the White family." Samuel Cross nodded and said nothing more. Samuel Cross's injuries were healing very slowly. Because his internal organs, including his spleen, were damaged, he didn't even dare to use medicinal pills. He could only silently channel the Vajra demon subjugation mantra. Besides that, the only thing Samuel Cross could do was draw talismans. Fortunately, he had prepared plenty of low-grade talisman papers and cinnabar in the past when he wanted to learn talisman crafting. However, the most troublesome thing was dealing with the mortals around him. "Young master, the Lord is looking for you," Randy said respectfully. For some reason, the young master had been very quiet these days, rarely leaving his room, almost like he had become a completely different person. Randy now felt a little afraid of meeting this young master. Samuel Cross nodded, put away his drawing tools and talismans, and followed Randy out of the room. Both the lord and the lady of the house were present. Samuel Cross merely nodded. He couldn't be bothered to speak. The lord didn't mind, but the lady seemed somewhat disappointed. She had watched this child grow up, but he had changed so much recently. Not only was he silent and withdrawn, but he also stayed cooped up in the house, not even bothering to acknowledge her, his stepmother. The lord nodded and said, "Sammy, have you been reading these days?" Samuel Cross shook his head. The lord sighed. This son of his, when asked such a question in the past, would always come up with countless excuses. Now, he admitted it so bluntly that the lord didn't know how to respond. After thinking for a moment, the lord said, "At least you're not out wasting time anymore. Books have their benefits. Even if you don't pass the exams for officialdom, at the very least, you'll learn proper principles." Samuel Cross nodded. The lord was at a loss for words. This son of his had changed too much. Finally, he waved his hand and said, "All right, you may go." Samuel Cross respectfully bowed and quietly retreated. The lady couldn't help but say, "Husband, Sammy." The master shook his head and said, "Sigh, if it weren't for the fact that he behaves normally and can understand what people say, I would have thought he had become foolish." The lady asked, "Should we invite a monk to perform a ceremony?" The master replied, "A ceremony? Why? Sammy is much more composed now. Although he speaks little, I heard he released all the fish and shrimp he was raising, and the bird cages are gone too. This shows he has matured."